Hey everybody, today we're debating evolution on trial, and we are starting right now with the evolution side. Mark Reid, thanks so much for being with us. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, James. And I'll just share my screen here. And it's great to be here. Thank you. My name's Mark Reid. Today I'm debating for evolution on trial. Just 1 second, I'll get organised here. I want to thank James and Modern Day Debate for inviting me to debate, Atheist Junior for being my debate partner, and of course Sal and Eric for agreeing to debate and presenting arguments against the proposition. I want to make clear that I'm not an evolutionary biologist or a geneticist, or I don't really have any qualifications in the field at all. But I would like to go through a couple of the reasons why I believe that the theory of evolution is the best explanation for the diversity of life. So the definition of evolution, first off, all evolution is the change of heritable characteristics of biological populations over successive generations. There isn't really an argument that evolution doesn't happen at all. We all agree that living things, biological organisms, change over time. The main contention seems to be universal common ancestry and where evolution stops, if at all. It's important to note, however, that science says that the process of evolution is the same, whether it's within a species level or whether it's from one species to another. Now, there's a mountain of evidence for evolution. It says there's so much evidence that I couldn't put it all into a presentation. There's fossil record, embryology, phylogenetics. The list is absolutely huge. So today I'll be focusing on just two that I think are the strongest, chromosome 2 fusion and ERVs, or androgynous retroviruses. The fascinating thing about these two evidences is that they fit neatly into the theory of evolution that was already posited before we even found genetics. The outcomes were predicted and support what we already knew about evolution. In the interest of brevity, I'll keep things simple and just give an overview. I want to give AJ all the time that I can. So chromosome 2 fusion. The chromosomes are a long DNA molecule containing the DNA of the species. We differ from other great apes as they have 23 pairs or 46 chromosomes. We have 48. It was put forward that if we shared a common ancestor, as the theory of evolution said, us and chimpanzees are the most genetically similar, sort of being 95 to 98% similar, we should see that humans lost a pair of chromosomes somewhere. And that we do actually see. So these are the chromosomes of, and I'll just point these out. These are human, chimpanzee, gorilla, and orangutan. Now, pay particular focus on chromosome 2, where the human chromosome, as opposed to the chimp, has fused. These are actually labeled 2A and 2B in other great apes. I want to show the similarity between the two and how striking the similarity is. And how genetically similar we actually are, except for that join at chromosome 2. Chromosomes that have where they join to one another, when two chromosomes join to one another, they have a centromere in the center here, and they have a telomere at either end that bounds them. Now, what we should expect to see if two chromosomes fused was, instead of having a telomere at either end, it should have a telomere at either end and two telomeres in the center. It should also have a second centromere where that second chromosome fused on, and that's exactly what we found. We found that we have a telomere in chromosome 2 at either end, fragments of telomeres in the center, and a second fragmented centromere in the lower half of chromosome 2. And this is exactly what we'd see if they were fused, and not what we would expect to see if they were actually separate in others and we only had one chromosome 2 from the very start. The second evidence is ERVs. I think this is the strongest evidence. Retroviruses are viruses that infect the host and then write themselves into the host DNA, becoming part of that host DNA. If this happens in the germline, like a sperm or an egg, the origin point of an organism, the virus DNA gets replicated into the entire genetic structure of the organism, so that germline separates, multiplies, and becomes the entire organism. And then that virus is passed vertically down to its descendants, and that's called endogenization of the virus. These viral DNA elements have particular structure. They have a long terminal repeat on either end, followed by a GAG, POL, and ENV, and they're the structure of viruses. Now, only retroviruses have this structure, and those LTRs, the long terminal repeats, they only arise when a virus, a retrovirus, makes a cut in the DNA of a host, and they're very, very unique. That's how we can tell that ERVs have inserted themselves into DNA. So we share 205 of the same ERVs with chimpanzees. The DNA sequence is in exactly the same spot, and it's exactly the same virus. Apart from the unlikelihood this would happen between humans and apes, basically it means that out of 10 million possible locations of insertion, the same virus has inserted in the same place. That is astronomically unlikely that happened in two separate cases. The alternative is that it happened in a common ancestor, and that was passed through the lineage down to descendants, and it's simply we split off, but both of us kept that fragment of the retrovirus in our DNA. And the interesting thing about this is that the further you go away in the tree of life, the less of these viruses are shared between organisms. So what this tells us, the further back these organisms shared a common ancestor and then split off, they see less and less of these ERVs shared between them. Now, that's exactly what we would expect to see if organisms shared a common ancestor. It's not what we would expect to see from separate created lineages that are not related. And thank you very much. Those are my two strongest evidences that I want to present, but we can certainly discuss whatever my opponents want. Thank you.
You got it. We'll kick it over to Atheist Junior for his opening as well.
Back to you, James. James, you're on mute.
Thank you very much for that. Want to remind you folks, our guests are linked in the description. We're going to kick it over to Atheist Junior for his opening statement as well. Thanks so much for being with you. Thank you very much for being with us, Atheist Junior. Let me just, forgive me, folks, just 2 seconds. Where is this? Mark, if you're able to, for some reason, it usually gives me the option to stop your screen share, but I can't. There it is. Okay, I got it. And with that, we're going to kick it over to Atheist Junior. Thanks so much for being with us. Atheist Junior, the floor is all yours.
Okay. So is my screen share up too?
Yep.
All right. That was a fantastic presentation by my partner, Mark. So thank you so much for doing that intro. And thank you to James for having me on again. So I'm just going to add some additional pieces of evidence to what Mark said, because I think he gave a great definition of evolution and sort of laid out the foundation of what we're talking about here. So I just wanted to add some additional pieces of evidence that I think are pretty interesting. Now, creationists say a lot that evolution can't be true because we weren't there in the distant past to observe it. We don't have a time machine to go back and see these things. And even if we did, they happen on such a long time span that we wouldn't be able to see changes on a macro scale. But the thing is that we actually do see evolution happening today. So in the laboratory, scientists studied a form of unicellular algae that's called Chlamydomonas. Now, they exposed this unicellular algae to a filter-feeding predator, and in response to predation, several specimens evolved multicellularity as a defense mechanism. So the reason this is significant is because once they had this multicellular matrix, this extracellular matrix that made them much bigger, this filter-feeding predator was no longer able to eat them because they were too big. So this is a true multicellular organism that used to be single-celled, and this experiment happened over 50 weeks. Now, that's evolution that we've been able to observe. Now, as a counterpoint, my opponents might say that, well, it's still an algae, but normally this is a single-celled algae that only brings forth other single-celled algae. So this should be a new kind of algae, right? A multicellular kind with new genetic information. It got new traits like an extracellular matrix. So this is also not just a colony, because in a colony, each cell could break off and live on its own. But in this organism, if a cell breaks off, it'll die. And again, this is a beneficial change, a beneficial mutation, because it's now too big for the predator to eat. And what would constitute a multicellular organism? And what would constitute a macroevolutionary change? So creationists either want these huge steps, or you want 1,000 transitions between each steps, and you're basically positing a God of the gaps argument, because when it comes to transitionary forms, usually when we fill in one gap, they'll just say, well, now there's another gap that you have to fill in. So we have a transition from a 1-cell to a 2-cell organism. Now, I think that should count as evolution right there. The next step would be 4. And since both cells can replicate, you double the amount of cells during each generation, assuming there are no cell deaths. And these early colonies existed and lived as smaller colonies and larger colonies. And I would like to know, is this a different kind of algae? Because creationists can't seem to differentiate between a special creation event and something simply being a new kind. Now, either all these algae cells with mostly the same DNA and the same anatomy are not the same kind, and we witnessed evolution, or these are all the same kind, and we witnessed diversity to the point where the same kind is both multicellular and unicellular. To me, that doesn't really make sense. So these are 6 different stages of the Chlamydomonas algae. Now, I think a multicellular organism should be distinct from a unicellular one. And even if I don't use the term kind personally, and scientists don't either, I think it would qualify as a different one. But again, creationists can't distinguish between something being a unique creation made at the beginning of creation and a new kind coming to be. And here we can see a fish that basically is walking. And creationists, they might want to limit evolution to say, well, we only see evidence of microevolution, but we can still get pretty far with just microevolution, with just small changes. The flexibility of existing parts to perform new functions through microevolution. So using structures that you already have in new and creative ways can help you adapt to your environment and beat the competition for resources and mating rights. So evolution is not just about massive visible changes. To me, I think it's just about being good enough and using the things that you have to live long enough to reproduce. Now, here we have another example of small changes, but I've heard creationist arguments about, well, how could you have a bird evolve because you could never have half a wing? Well, flying squirrels, while they have no descendants with better wings, are proof that the transitional half wing is completely functional and possible if under what should be considered creationism. This should be considered a creation because we know that these animals exist. So if it's not evolution, then it seems to me that the creationist argument is not a scientific one. It seems like it's more of a semantic one. So what happens if flying squirrels get better at flying? Are flying squirrels a new kind of animal, or is it a squirrel bat, or just a squirrel that can fly? So we already know that greater morphological distances are already admitted by creationists. Would this not count as macroevolution? Totally new functions that evolve from pre-existing traits in a squirrel lineage, or just a microevolutionary change? So I'll end my presentation there. And thanks again, Mark and James, for having me on.
Thank you very much for that opening. And we're going to kick it over to the, you could say, skeptics of evolution side. Thanks so much for being with us, Sal. And thanks so much for being with us, Eric. The floor is all yours, Sal, right now.
Is my screen up?
Yep.
All right, in science's pecking order, evolutionary biology lurks somewhere near the bottom, far closer to the pseudoscience of phrenology than to physics. That wasn't a creationist saying that. That was Jerry Coyne who wrote Why Evolution is True. Let's accept for the sake of argument there is universal common ancestry. At least that's the primary viewpoint. There's some deviations from that. At least the organismal level. Well, where this falls apart, oh, by the way, that's a squirrel munching on its cousin. Where this falls apart is at the parts that make up life. There's no universal common ancestor for the protein parts that make up life. And I will try to demonstrate that. This is problematic for evolution. This is the correct viewpoint, orchard. And if that seems out in left field, I have video evidence of Dr. Dan Cardinal agreeing with me. He's an evolutionary biologist at Rutgers, and there are other papers to that effect. So I'm going to attack the problem of evolution at the protein level. So I'd say geometry is priority. Geometry is priority. So if we kind of like had a universal common ancestral design for a car, it seems reasonable through slight successive modifications. It can diversify to all these other cars. You know, it starts with the car that Carl Benz of Mercedes-Benz fame made in 1886, and you could see all the diversification of cars from there. That seems reasonable. That looks like a universal tree of life, at least on the conceptual level. The problem is this tree does not work if we were to take the parts of the car, by way of analogy, the protein parts, but if you take the parts of the car, you can't name a part from which all the parts descended, like say a gas tank, a tire, a piston, a battery, a spark plug, and a radiator. And that will actually even play out at the protein level. So let's look at this tetrameric potassium ion channel, and you can see the geometry. That's another rendering of it, a Richardson ribbon diagram. And you could see there's like what I call the man-made shape there on the left and the God-made on the right. There's a problem of all or nothing functionality. If we had a radiator, all the basic features have to be there for it to work. That is problematic for the evolution of major protein families. It's similar to Michael Behe's irreducible complexity, but some nuances there. I'm going to skip some slides here. Let me see how much time I have. Okay, so we could look at the topoisomerase protein, for example. That's one I published on with good scientists like Joe DeWeese. We have published both in creationist literature and also he published in Nature. He's both a creationist and a secular scientist of great degree. We don't have time to show this video, plus we may have technical problems to show the topoisomerase. Maybe in the discussion we'll show this. Unless we have all the parts here, it just doesn't evolve. So we're going to have all these independent protein families to make something like this. And at some point, even if we accept universal common ancestry at the organismal level, we have to invoke miracles at the protein level, at least the major protein family level. And then at that point, it's not really very distinguishable from special creation. The topoisomerase cuts DNA. So it looks like a pair of scissors, but it's even more interesting than that. It can cut DNA to untangle it, and then it untangles it after cutting it, and then it has to reconnect it together. If it cuts but doesn't reconnect, this is a disaster. Life is over. There's no further evolution. Furthermore, even within the topoisomerase family, we can't seem to find universal common ancestry. That's a diagram from the paper I'm happy to share. We can examine it. And let me just blast through another part here. Geometry is priority. So even with like a bolt and a nut, you have to have very tight, precise fits. To random variations in the geometry are fatal to the system. That is also true at the protein level, as can be evidenced by this diagram from Bruce Albert's Cellular Biology. Everything has to fit. That's why little changes to geometry are disastrous. And that's why most random mutations are deleterious and compromising a function. If people want to see a little bit more of this, we could talk about it later or even in an after show. This is a spelling of the collagen protein. There's a non-random pattern here. This is the amino acids, and this is a zinc finger. We can show also non-random pattern here. The significance of that is it is brutally evident if you take a collagen and a zinc finger or any other major protein family, there is no universal common ancestor, consistent with what Dr. Dan said. So if we invoke universal common ancestry at the organismal level, we're going to have to invoke miracles to make the proteins. And at that point, it's indistinguishable from special creation. The creationists, like myself, would argue maybe it's just better to invoke, to dump universal common ancestry altogether, because if we're going to invoke special creation for the protein families, we can just as well invoke it for everything else. Thank you. Eric?
Well, that's right. Want to remind you folks, our guests are linked in the description. And then I got you loud and clear now, Eric. Ready for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. That was a great opening, and I want to thank my two atheist friends here for your opening. And if you don't mind, I know this might be a little bit unusual, but would it be okay if I just asked a yes or no question just to clarify your position on something? And then I can carry it on real quick. I was just wondering, and this is for both of you, are you of the ilk that say evolution is a fact, or would you agree with me that evolution is not a fact? And do you believe every fossil is transitional, or would you agree with me that not every fossil is transitional?
I would say that it seems based on current evidence that evolution is factual, and that you could say that every fossil is transitional, but I think that that requires a little bit extra explanation, other than just stating it outright.
Mark, would you agree?
I would say that evolution is a fact. The theory of evolution is the model describing the process in which evolution works. And I would have to agree with AJ saying that every fossil is transitional. There's a lot of confusion about what transitional means, but I would tentatively sort of say that could be applied to fossils, yes.
Okay. Thank you guys for your answers. Now, here's what I would like to bring out. I'd like to bring out, first of all, since we're speaking about evolution, just the fact that so many people believe in evolution, this does not mean that evolution is a fact. Okay? I wouldn't even consider evolution a science at this point, because science has rules. There are pseudosciences, on the other hand, where you don't apply these rules. And that, my friend, is exactly where evolution fits. Now, what you bring up, for instance, I believe every fossil is transitional. Okay, that's fine. You're allowed to hold that hypothesis, but I think that you're forgetting scientific method. First of all, you make an observation, and you're going to find out, what people are going to find out tonight is what evolution is built on is so flimsy, it's amazing that it's even still afloat. There's nothing to it. It's all imagination. It is pure imagination. For instance, people look at your claims, and that's what these are. These are empty claims of transitional fossils. Transitional fossils everywhere. But how do you figure these are transitional fossils? Mark, I saw one of your debates with a fellow on dinosaurs, and you told him in 3 different specific spots, what you're doing is you're taking something out of the ground, you're taking a look at it, and you're making claim. You're making claim after claim after claim. You're stacking claims on top of each other. And when one claim gets proven wrong, you just make another claim. Well, that's what you're doing with transitional fossils. You did these. Evolution stands on 2 things. One, transitional fossils. This is your biggest evidence for it. And 2 is DNA. This is your biggest evidence for it. So now we have to separate what is your observation, what is your hypothesis, and what have you done to test your hypothesis or to falsify it? Well, I submit nothing. First of all, let's take transitional fossils, for instance. Transitional fossils, Archaeopteryx is a good example. You have the Archaeopteryx. The Archaeopteryx is said to be a transitional form in between a theropod dinosaur and a modern bird. Somewhere in there, that's where you fit Archaeopteryx. So now, you have your observation that this is based on. What is your observation? Well, the Archaeopteryx has similarities of a theropod dinosaur, and it has similarities with the bird. So we can assume or hypothesize that it is in fact related. It is a transitional form between the two. Now, falsify that baby. There's no way to falsify that. It's a claim. It's an unfalsifiable claim. And if it's unfalsifiable, it's not even science. It's as good as science fiction. Dr. Colin Patterson was the lead paleontologist, the head paleontologist for the British Museum of Natural History. And he wrote books on evolution, toured for evolution. And when asked why he didn't include pictures of transitional fossils, he says, fossils can tell us many things, but they cannot tell us whether or not they were ancestors to or from anything else. They can't tell us that. You don't have the. No. I'm going to use another example here.
About 30 seconds left.
Okay. So basically, let me just wrap it up by saying this. You don't have any proof whatsoever. None. Zero. Zip. Zilch. The onus is on you to provide said proof that even one transitional fossil exists. Show me the tests. Show me the DNA where it was the DNA of this transitional fossil was tested against its child and its parent ancestry, relatives, and you've proven your point. But you'll never prove your point because out of all these millions of transitional fossils, you don't have so much as one.
And time. With that, we're going to jump into open conversation. But first, I want to say, folks, in case it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. We hope you feel welcome no matter what walk of life you are from. We're glad to have you here. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. We have many more juicy debates to come. For example, at the bottom right of your screen, Mark McQueen and King Crocoduck, legendary debater in the creation evolution world on YouTube. They will be colliding later this month, or I should say September. It's going to be a juicy one. You don't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button. And with that, gentlemen, thanks so much. The floor is all yours.
Are you sure it was Mark McLean? I thought it was David McQueen.
David, thanks so much. It's been a long
No worries.
day.
David McLean. No Mark involved at all. But thank you so much for your introduction, Sal and Eric. And thank you so much, Atheist Junior. That was a wonderful presentation. I do appreciate it. First, I'd like to get into the Sal's start as sort of the evolution at protein level. Because as far as I understood it, we shouldn't expect to see evolution at a sort of protein level. The proteins evolve de novo, as in new proteins evolve over time. So why would we, I guess what I'm saying is, why would we expect to see the same proteins at the very start, the primitive life forms like prokaryotes and things, if they evolve over time? I don't understand that, Sal. Sal, I think you're muted, mate. I think you've got the mute on.
Sorry about that, and I didn't have a chance to greet Dr. Reid.
Well, we still can't hear you. I think that it might be that your other device is picking up on your mic, Sal. I'm not sure if that's it, but we know that I can't. It's very difficult to hear you.
Can you hear me now? Do I have to?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah,
crystal clear.
It might be that my microphone. So thank you all for bearing with me, and Mark and Eric, James and AJ. Greetings. I didn't have a chance in my opening to extend my greetings. Thank you very much for being a part of this discussion. I'm going to try to understand your question, Mark. And if I misstated, please correct me.
No problem.
The fundamental problem is some of these major protein families, they just won't exist. It makes no sense for them to exist unless they are all there at once. And I gave the example of the topoisomerase. So yes, you can, the question is really, in evolution on trial, it's not just common descent. That's not, there are lots of people that accept common descent, like Michael Behe, but think they're problematic things. And that's what I'm trying to attack. But the thing is, like something like topoisomerase, which looks like it would have to come fully formed for it to work, or at least even if you co-opt pre-existing parts, the amount of miracles to put together pre-existing parts to make a functioning topoisomerase seems astronomically remote to me, even at an intuitional level. And then as I've worked through some of the math for, like, say, the transition from prokaryote to eukaryote, and they have to do things, they have to reformat things and insert things like nuclear localization signals. Once we get into the cellular and molecular details, rather than just looking at shapes and fossils and, speculating transitionals, when we get down to the actual molecular level, which what Michael Behe did, it starts to become like, well, at some point it looks indistinguishable from miracles. And that's where the discussion, I think, really needs to go. A lot of creationists focus on arguing the fossil record. I don't do that. My research has been at the cellular and molecular level. And so I ended up throwing a lot of terms and concepts that people usually don't hear in this discussion, but that's what I research. So my main claim is, you look at the part, it's again kind of like looking at the parts of a car. So you look at the first car created by Carl Benz, and then you look at modern cars that have all these new parts and components. And some of these components are very, very, very sophisticated, like, say, fuel injection versus the carburation. And at the protein level, we see the emergence of these.
We lost you again, Sal. Volume-wise.
At the protein level...
we still can't hear you, Sal. I don't know if you're able to hear me.
I can hear you.
It's like you're underwater. Like literally under. It's really that.
Can I switch to?
That's better.
That's better.
I don't know what it is that you can hear me. There seems to be an optimal position if I just kind of scream right into the screen of the smartphone. Sorry about that.
Perfect right now.
Okay, I'm going to try.
Scream away.
I'll scream away. So, that's what I find problematic. At some point, these transitions, or like, say, from a random set of DNA coding a brand new polypeptide, when we actually examine it in detail, especially for what we call multimeric proteins, that's astronomically improbable. And then also, even when we take the same protein going from a prokaryote, like the bacteria,
we're losing you.
I'm sorry?
We were losing you for a second.
That's not on me.
Well,
maybe I'll let someone else talk. I'll have an after show on my channel, and
probably
my audio is usually better there.
Well, it sounds like your main concern is irreducible complexity here, Sal. That seems to what it boils down to.
I think the main concern is that there's just no proof for evolution whatsoever. You point to DNA similarities, for instance. Okay, let's attack that for just a moment. Now, that's DNA similarities compared to what portion of our DNA? Is that talking about the entire genome, or just or are we talking mainly about the coding part of the DNA?
Oh, you compare the nucleotide sequences, and we look for the similarities in them.
Right. And so you're talking about the coding DNA. That's where you see your similarities, correct?
Not specifically, just in the sequence in general.
Of course it is. That's exactly where you see your similarities, is in the coding section. I can pull up two papers right now, peer-reviewed, but put them right in front of you. This says 1% of our DNA is coding DNA. Okay, so when you're talking about chimp and human DNA is 99% similar,
I want to give you a bit more time. Forgive me, pardon my interruption, but just because we haven't heard from Atheist Junior or Mark so far in the open discussion, I just want to maybe kind of speed it along for both you, Sal, and Eric.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just wrap that up by saying that you have 1% of the DNA that is 99% the same, 99% similar. But all these other claims of DNA proving this and that That's just another claim. It's just another hypothesis based on your observation, and it's an untested, unfalsifiable claim. You
Well,
cannot.
it's not just the coding section. It's the entire genome. It's not just the coding section. I'm really sorry, but that's not how we compare DNA. And the thing is that we're using the same kind of technology to tell who's related, you know, whether you're related to your father or mother or cousin or something like that. And nobody seems to have a problem using it like that. It's only when it shows the similarity and the nested hierarchy that when we go out further and further and further, the similarities get less and less and less. And what I would like you to do is then address the whole problem of ERVs for the creationists, of why we have these endogenous retroviruses between us and chimpanzees. That is a 10 million to 1 for one of them. And we have that 205 of them there, making the likelihood of individual infection to be so close to zero, it's almost impossible. Can you talk on that, explain that at all?
Yeah. Now let's examine this. What is your observation?
That we see ERVs, which insert themselves into a random point in the genome, inserted in exactly the same spot with exactly the same virus, 205 times in both us and chimpanzees.
Okay. Now, what do you hypothesize based on your observation?
Well, we can hypothesize before it was found that if we are indeed related, we should see these ERV markers in us and close relations to us. The further away the relations get to us, the less of those we should see.
So, in other words, you note a similarity, and you hypothesize a relationship because of that similarity. Is that true or false?
Well, we hypothesize what we should find when analysing the DNA of not only us and chimpanzees, but other animals like the great apes and other mammals and reptiles, etc. What we should find.
And you don't hypothesize that similarity means anything?
Well, I think the hypothesis is that it's more likely, if we have two possible outcomes, it's more likely that this is a result of evolution and not just a really, really specific coincidence.
Bingo.
That we would see these.
That is your hypothesis based on that observation. Now I want to see the falsifiability.
Well, it's not my hypothesis because I'm not a scientist.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. So Eric, the falsifiability is that if we look in a very distant animal and find more ERVs than, you know, us and chimpanzees, for instance, we know that's false. Well, no, don't just shake your head. We know that to be false because we've disproven.
How does that prove
it's because we've made that testable prediction. And I think this is what you're not understanding about testable predictions. No, Eric, let me talk, mate. Let me talk. This is what you don't understand about testable predictions, because you brought up Archaeopteryx, and the fact that we found it and looked at it isn't the big deal about Archaeopteryx. And the other one I want to bring up was Tiktaalik, the walking fish with lungs that we found. The important part about them is we predicted them beforehand. Darwin predicted a bird with teeth, and that's exactly what Archaeopteryx is. We predicted to find a fish that could walk on land and have formation of lungs from its swim bladder, and that's exactly what we found. That is the testable falsified.
Wait. Did you just hypothesize these things in a vacuum, or are you saying that they are all related and go back to a last unified common ancestor?
No, he was saying that Darwin predicted that a proto-bird with unfused wing fingers would be found, and then 2 years later they found Archaeopteryx.
So you misunderstand the question. The question I'm asking is this. Now, I understand that. Are you hypothesizing all of this in a vacuum? In other words, or do they have something to do with one another? Are you saying that all of these things are related because of these observations?
Eric, no hypothesis is in a vacuum. That's the point of hypotheses. You hypothesize something. In this case, Darwin says we should, if evolution is true, we should find a bird with unfused fingers and a teeth, and then that's what we found.
Okay, so let's say you find something like that. Does that mean just because you found that skeleton that it is automatically related to the theropod dinosaur and the modern bird?
What do you mean related?
Not automatically, but it's very strong evidence. And then,
so in other words, it doesn't mean anything. It still has you still have to test that thing. You still
how do you get from very strong evidence to doesn't mean anything? That's sort of saying, well, if you find a guy with a knife and he's standing over a dead body with the knife in hand and blood dripping off of it, it's very strong evidence, but it doesn't mean anything.
Very strong evidence for what? That they're related?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're not proving they're related. There's only one way you can prove whether or not they are related, and that is to test the DNA of the common ancestor, to test the DNA of the Archaeopteryx, and we have the DNA of the modern bird. But that's the only way you're going to be able to falsify that hypothesis.
Do you think that Archaeopteryx has to be a direct ancestor to a modern bird for it to count as evidence?
Did I say that at all?
I think you implied it.
No, I said that you have to follow the scientific procedure, scientific methodology. And just because you're an atheist who believes in evolution, and most scientists believe in evolution, or at least say they do because they've got skin in the game, that doesn't prove anything. They're claims. They're empty claims. You're excusing yourself from falsifiability. You're just totally neglecting the point that you're not even following scientific methodology.
Well, that's not true. I mean, I brought up a couple of examples that could be falsified, especially if you don't mind, Eric, especially the chromosome 2 fusion, where if those chromosomes weren't fused and we didn't find a second centromere and the telomeres in the center, as I explained, that would have falsified evolution because it would have said, hey, our chromosomes didn't fuse at number 2, like the chimpanzee still has 2A and 2B. So you're basically making these statements that evolution is unfalsifiable when that just isn't true. There's a lot of ways to falsify evolution and a lot of things that we expect to falsify it that didn't happen. And so that's why we think it is it's a real theory and it's a real scientific, has scientific basis.
So you're just going to make more claims.
It's not an empty claim if you predict to find a certain fossil and then you find it. That's not an empty claim.
That's no proof that you found what you were looking for either.
So I'm not sure what you mean by proof, because science doesn't work with proofs usually. That's math.
Now, I love when atheists use this. You see, because here's the difference. Your science doesn't prove anything. Why doesn't your science prove anything? Because it's not science. It's pseudoscience that is unfalsifiable. Science proves things every single day. Medical science has proven they can control the heart rate with medication. I can take carbide and mix it with water and prove to you through science that it is possible to create acetylene in such a way. We can take a signal. Science has proven that we can send signals through the atmosphere. Science has proven that we can launch rockets from the Earth. Science has proven that we can put satellites into space. Proofs
are something that's a mathematical concept. In science, you find the best current, most parsimonious explanation for things and the best model. Because we don't decide that things are true and that we're always going to think that this is true in science. It's the best current explanation.
Yeah, so when we send signals, we find the best method for sending them, because they don't always work. We have things that can block signals, and we make a model of how those signals are working. We don't just say, hey, it is proof. That's not how these things work.
Just to be sure that Sal isn't just... Sal,
I think Sal...
So science hasn't proven that we can mass communicate.
Sal, we can't hear you yet. I can see your lips moving, but we haven't been able to hear you.
So is it your position that's
No, not you, Sal. I just want to give Sal a
Eric
sorry,
doesn't want to
Eric.
let it go.
I just want to, just in case Sal, I appreciate your passion though, Eric. I just want to be sure that in case Sal had anything, we could hear him because I saw his lips moving. Did you have anything, Sal?
Yeah. So if there's any sound, does it get muffled if someone else's microphone is not muted?
So
you hear
far,
me?
I haven't noticed that pattern yet because nobody.
No, you're talking fine. So.
I think if it's your phone, you might just be covering the mic with your finger. That could be it.
Oh, that could be it. It does have a muffled sound to it.
I don't know where the mic is. Now I can go to the other mic on my other computer.
It's loud and clear. Like if you keep going like this, I think we'll be good.
Okay, if I'm talking in this direction.
Yep.
Okay, as far as the ERVs, if we postulate that they were independently positioned there, I have good evidence that they would be because I have, if you'll Google the Sternberg-Collins paradox, you'll see I address this. We have independent transposons that don't have common ancestry that are put in the same position. So this is very problematic for evolution. We can just extrapolate that to the ERVs. Also, the ERVs are finding out, like all of the a lot of non-coding DNA is very important, that when it transcribes is very important for creating a phase, these membraneless organelles. So it is not just random, it has purpose. The ERVs also are tied and connected to, they are bound by zinc finger proteins that hook to the CAP1 complex. This is way more complicated than evolutionary biologists have been saying, and it's only coming out in the last few years, and they got that wrong. So that's an example of, the ERV thing is way more complicated than we're making it out to be, and it would also require what we would call coevolution, where you'd have to modify the zinc finger protein simultaneously with the ERV to make it workable. So just the fact that it's in the same position doesn't mean it evolved. It could also be specially created. And so the creationists would say it is common design. You can still assume common ancestry if you want, but I pointed out the problems with that with the independent protein lineages. So
Sal, I'm sorry, but it sounded like there that you're basically saying that you're sort of accounting for these ERVs through miracle, that they were created to look like they were from common descent.
No, this is like, okay, no, I respect that point, Mark, and that's a good point. But this is like saying when you put a pencil in water and it looks bent, therefore God's being deceptive. Or that when we look at the sky and it looks like the world is geocentric, it looks like God's deceiving us. The problem is when you have other data points that tell you that the idea, the theory is false, then you reject it. So I would say that just like geocentrism, evolution has a lot of testable predictions that actually succeed. Just like geocentrism would predict that the sun rises and sets every day. It doesn't make the theory correct. You have to look at the anomalies. And I pointed out one of the anomalies in the transition from prokaryotes to eukaryotes in the nuclear localization signals. You'd have to reformat all the proteins to be able to do this. This would be indistinguishable from a miracle. So this isn't, granted, you've probably not heard these arguments a lot because creationists don't talk about them, and that's why I'm glad I could be here. So, well, I published.
The problem there.
On this. Go on, Mark. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The problem there is that a lot of the evolutionary biologists and geneticists don't agree with you, Sal. Like Francis Collins, who ran the Human Genome Project, basically says evolution happened. He doesn't like it, but he has to admit it. And he's a very devout Christian. And the problem is that you're sort of expecting these structures to sort of evolve into their optimal function instantly, whereas that isn't really the case. I mean, I read about a lactase metabolism promoter, lactoperon in E. coli, and there's a 100 base sequence you can replace with just random strands of DNA. It still works. Sometimes it doesn't work as well. Sometimes it works just as well with these random elements in it. So the whole idea seems to boil down to two things from what I'm hearing. One's a irreducible complexity, and one's sort of just an appeal to incredulity, that you don't think that these things could have evolved over time. I think we should discuss the irreducible complexity because, as you mentioned, Behe was the main promoter of that. And we saw during the Kitzmiller versus Dober his bacterial flagellum, where it was demonstrated that that flagellum, which he said was irreducibly complex, actually it worked as a pump in other bacteria. So we know that these structures can start out as another thing, and proteins can have different functions, and then as they evolve, change functionality.
Do you know what the second chromosome is used for?
Can we stay on this topic? I wanted to add something to the Behe thing.
Sure, sorry.
Okay. So yeah, like he said, so we know in the Kitzmiller versus Dover trial, Michael Behe was testifying and he was cross-examined, and he conceded that there was no peer-reviewed papers that supported his claims about complex molecular systems like the bacterial flagellum, but also the blood clotting cascade and the immune system, that they were intelligently designed. And also that there were no peer-reviewed articles supporting his arguments that molecular structures were irreducibly complex. So he admitted this on the stand.
Mm-hmm. We can get it right.
I didn't use the word irreducible complexity for a reason, because there are some weaknesses to it. The other thing is all those claims of co-option of other parts is still very problematic, because it's just like taking, one set of parts and assembling it to be another function. It's not as trivial as they're making it out. That would be a necessary but not sufficient condition. It's not argument by incredulity. It's proof by contradiction, or argument by contradiction. If I said I don't believe a tornado can go through a junkyard and assemble a 747, that sounds like argument from incredulity, but actually the better way to say it is we would not expect a tornado passing through a junkyard to create a 747. So random mutation and also natural selection should not be expected to make these complex structures. We can prove that experimentally, and most natural selection, or shall we say a differential reproductive abundance, results in loss, in compromise of function. And as far as, yes, you can mutate some parts, but you can't mutate all of them. There are critical parts like in the topoisomerase protein and zinc finger proteins and collagens, et cetera, et cetera. I could point to so many examples. There are, as I said, geometry is priority. Geometry is priority.
And the proof
at some point, this thing's going to fail. If you don't have the minimal functionality, even making a multimeric protein where all the parts have to connect, because a lot of these complexes, like say a homohexameric helicase, has 6 parts that have to be there all at once. You need all the connecting parts, just like you would, say, the parts of a car. It's far more complex than that. To assume that it can assemble in gradual pieces just doesn't work. It's not argument from incredulity. We have good evidence that it's not going to work in gradual steps. You may take some examples where something's slowly optimized with little changes, but you can't generalize that to everything. This is like going to a casino and saying, I won once, and then I can say every time I go, I'm going to win. It's just not going to work. So what happens in evolutionary biology, they'll cherry pick some examples and pretend that can be extrapolated to things like the things I was describing.
No, we're not using the gambler's fallacy and saying because we've won once. What we're saying is you're saying that you would not expect complex structures to be formed over these processes, but unfortunately, most evolutionary biologists and geneticists just do not agree with you there, Sal. And what we're saying is this argument has been brought up before by Behe and demonstrated that complex structures can form over these processes. So what we're saying is that you starting out with the clear distinction that this cannot happen, any instance of it happening shows you wrong.
What structures?
No, I did not say all complex structures. I'm specifically pointing out the structures such as the nuclear localization signal that has to be reformatted going from the prokaryote to eukaryotic. You don't see that transition happening, and it's agreement, observations agree with predictions. And so I didn't say all complex structures. I specifically pointed out, I can go through a laundry list of which ones that you can try to falsify. So I don't make the claim that other creationists do that you can't form all complex structures. I'm saying
You know-
specific ones. And those specific ones falsify evolutionary theory. Also, yes, most evolutionary biologists don't agree with me, but in science's pecking order, evolutionary biology lurks somewhere near the bottom, far closer to the pseudoscience of phrenology than to physics. There's a reason that the major research teams that are trying to understand cellular biology, molecular biology, they have engineers, scientists, computational biologists. The last people that they need on their research team are evolutionary biologists because they are disrespected. They don't make any contribution to the advancement of knowledge.
Craig
Yeah,
Venter,
I don't think that's true, but
do you know, Mark, do you know who Craig Venter is?
no. Did you
You don't
enlighten
know.
me?
You don't know who Craig Venter is. Craig Venter is probably the world's foremost geneticist. Craig Venter was putting together the human genome before teams of government and corporate scientists could. Craig Venter is the only man in the entire world who has designed DNA on his computer, extracted the DNA from an E. coli bacteria cell, and then injected that bacteria cell with the DNA that he created, and it began to reproduce. He's the only man in the world to have ever done this. And because of this, one school followed suit and tried to edit the genes of another E. coli bacteria cell. But he says, Craig Venter says, and I've got the link right here for anybody who wants to see it, that the tree of life of common descent is an artifact of old science that hasn't held up. Period.
Yeah. So the problem with the tree of life and what we're currently doing is we're trying.
Mark. I'm not done.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean.
So I'm saying that to lead up to this. You're talking about similarities of DNA. For instance, the second chromosome. Similarities that prove, according to the evolutionists, that we have a common ancestor with the chimp. Okay. Now, first of all we have is the similarity, and I could pull this up too, where it does set you straight. I don't know if anybody can see this, but this is a paper that was put out. Let me see. This is peer-reviewed. Junk DNA defines differences between humans and chimps from 2011. That's how old this science is, dude. And this
Is that a good thing?
This is how far.
Pretty old paper, but sure.
Right. That's how far behind evolutionists are.
No, that's a paper from like 10, 15, I can't count, 12 years ago now?
11 years ago.
You can't twist your source being really old as a good thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. And plus, it's not like we stopped in 2011, where we're still putting out papers and stuff, right?
Well, I don't blame you for wanting to hide from this point. The point is, this paper right here hasn't been disproven or corrected by anybody. You can't correct this paper. And this paper states that the genetic differences lie in the uncoded DNA, which is 98% of the DNA. There's only 1% of the DNA that's coding DNA, and that's where the similarities lie between humans and chimp. This paper shows us specifically that we differ, vastly differ, in the uncoded part, which is the largest part of the DNA, the junk DNA, as it's called.
This paper that we can't see.
So that's okay. I mean, if you give me the name of it, I can certainly look it up and have a look at it. But I mean, these are the same tests that we use to trace ancestry, whether you came from Europe or came from, regardless of how it's done, everybody accepts them as a way to trace ancestry. So I don't know what you're getting at here. And I'd like to address Sal's whole thing of geometry. No, hang on a second.
What I'm getting
I'd like to address, come on, Eric, come on, mate.
I want to give Mark a chance, and I promise we'll come back to Eric and
Sal. Come on, Eric. So Sal's thing of, like, you keep comparing biological mechanisms to cars and engineering. And I think that's a big mistake. I think that biological organisms function in a very dissimilar way to engineered parts from humans. And I really dislike the whole car analogy, because cars don't reproduce. They don't, do cell multiplication. They don't act like biological mechanisms. They just don't. I'm not sure where this line of reasoning is going with you, Eric. I'm not 100% sure. So you've got a paper that says...
Here's where it is in a nutshell. First of all, true to what I said in the very beginning, you can name a few observances, a few things you observe. You can name a couple of hypotheses based on these observations, but you can't prove a thing you're saying. You have not one single test to prove a common ancestor out there. What about the common ancestor between dogs and wolves?
No, the DNA test is the proof. That's what the proof is.
No.
Yes.
No, that's your hypothesis. You look.
How is that a hypothesis?
You don't even understand the difference between your observation, your hypothesis, and a test. Okay, what is your observation?
Well, I mean, it would be that creatures appear to be related due to physiological and differences.
Okay.
Yeah, like morphological similarities.
Thank you.
That was our first
inkling. So, like I said in the very beginning, you look at morphological similarities, and you look at the similarities in DNA, and you automatically hypothesize that we all have common ancestors.
What do you mean by automatically hypothesize?
Well, that's
what do you think a hypothesis is?
Well, that's what you're hypothesizing. That's what you are hypothesizing.
Yeah. Can you give us a definition of hypothesis?
If you want, no, you play that game if you like.
No? Okay.
If you want to hold to that hypothesis, that's fine. Hold to it. Feel free. But don't go claiming it's a fact because I'm going to call BS on you every single time. Because you have a hypothesis that you cannot test. You cannot test, for instance, whether or not I have a common ancestor with the chimp, because you can't point to that common ancestor. You don't have the DNA of the common ancestor to test to see if it is, in fact, a common ancestor, or it's just a claim.
What about your cousin? Could we test that to see if you're related to your cousin?
We're the same species.
But could we test it?
Why does that matter?
We're the same species.
Why does that matter? DNA is the same structure. It's the same proteins through all of same base pairs. Why does it matter?
That doesn't mean it's evolution, dude. That could be common creation.
How do you know you're the same species?
How do I know?
Yeah.
Define species.
Well,
what is the biological definition of species?
So
usually
species are... Sorry,
ahead,
AJ, go ahead. No, that's fine. You go.
Well, usually it's defined as to a population that can interbreed with each other. And they tend to have morphological similarities, but not always.
And
well, species is sort of, it's when a mutation sort of vector is removed from, populations are removed from one another. So there is a differing genetic vector between two different populations is a species.
So you guys don't know how to put this simply as...
Well, it's not a simple thing.
A species, it is just simple. It's been simple for over 300 years. A species is a group of common organisms that are capable of interbreeding and producing fertile offspring, period. It has nothing to do with DNA. It has nothing to do with genetics. That is the entire definition of the word species when you're talking about biological species.
So how do you know you're a human species?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I am a Homo sapien, according to our current classifications. Now, what is Neanderthal? How is Neanderthal defined, classified, but then what are they in reality?
Is that a different species?
You tell me.
I mean, we answered your question. You could answer ours.
It's okay. Well, if you don't know the answer, I will tell you. Neanderthal is classified as Homo neanderthalis. Okay? Homo sapiens are classified as Homo sapiens, two different species. And yet, we have absolute proof. There's that word proof. That we interbred with Homo sapiens and Neanderthal interbred and produced fertile offspring. So
you think they're the same species?
I don't think they're the same species. According to the definition of a biological species, we are the same species, but we're being represented as two different species.
Yeah, so that isn't the scientific definition, unfortunately.
In order to give the appearance of evolution where there is no evolution. So...
Yeah, okay, so I think we're getting way off topic into...
No, I think you're stuck. You can't give me an alternate definition of a biological species.
I gave you a definition. I don't know if you accepted it, but I did give it.
We're talking about biological species. And the correct definition
why
of
can two species breed yet produce infertile offspring? Why does that happen?
I don't know. And that has nothing to do with the subject. That has nothing to do with the
Well, I mean, horses and donkeys can interbreed and produce offspring. Why are they infertile?
Why? I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you why. It's because their vectors of DNA have diverged.
That has nothing to do with the biological definition of species. And
yeah, it does. That's the definition I gave. And the reason why is because once they have diverged a certain amount, what happens is that those animals can no longer produce fertile offspring. They produce infertile offspring, which is why they're different species. They can still interbreed and they can still produce offspring. A mule is just an offspring between a donkey and a horse, and it is infertile. And there's a ton of them. There's tigers and lions produce ligers. Your explanation of offspring of species doesn't address that.
Well, apparently your short-sightedness in this field isn't going to help you either, because not all mules are infertile, number one. Lions and tigers interbreed, and they have fertile offspring. That happens all the time. Dogs, coyotes, and wolves are called separate species, and yet we have coy dogs, we have coy wolves. Mm-hmm. They're all the same species according to the biological definition. But in every one of these cases, you have them classified differently to give the appearance of evolution where there is no evolution. I want to know why aren't they?
Wolves and dogs aren't the same species. One's canine lupus and one's canine familiaris.
Oh, so you don't even know that. The dog, that is a subspecies of the gray wolf. They're both Canis lupus.
Okay, well, I mean, you do know that we sort of domesticated wolves and bred them through artificial selection into what dogs are. Excuse me, Eric, please. We bred them into what dogs are today from wolves.
How does that excuse you from the biological definition of species?
Well, you can't just say dogs. You have to differentiate domesticated dogs.
Why?
And because there's a difference.
Why?
Because of the classification of species and subspecies.
They're the same species.
Well, species is an arbitrary concept that
no,
humans
it's not.
came up
No,
with.
it's not.
But
it's not arbitrary.
It is.
It's no more arbitrary. No, it's no more arbitrary than mammals and reptiles.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the whole point.
It's a man. That there you go.
Yeah. So the problem is we're trying to fit the sort of modern understanding of genetics into the Linnaean system. That's what the problem is, and there's a lot of issues with things being really undefined and not able to be easily categorized, because when you're talking about biological entities, they're really hard to classify. The problem isn't that we have the wrong theory and we have no idea what's going on. The problem is trying to fit these things into a domain kingdom phylum. It is this Linnaean system that we're sort of stuck with. It would be better if we could trace the
I would like to remind everybody this.
I wanted just to hear the last sentence, or let's let Mark finish that sentence. I promise.
Yeah, I think Eric here's got a bit of a self-control problem. The problem is trying to fit them in, and it would be better if we could trace the individual genetic lines for each creature and how they diverged. but our classification system at the moment is imperfect. And that's why, as you said about the tree of life isn't a perfect representation, because it is based upon this ordering system that isn't the best thing for seeing how these animals work with one another. So, I'm sorry if I got things wrong, but the problem is the system of ordering, not that we've got the wrong theory. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I'd just like to remind everybody that comes from somebody that did not know that dogs and gray wolves were the same species, and said that that the opposite is true. Now, I do respect your position. I do respect your right to hold to any position you want to. I really do. And I would have a beer with either one of you guys. I believe you'd both be fine gents to settle down with and have a beer. And I mean that sincerely. But I want to say this, where I differ with you and where I'm going to call you out is by making certain statements as though they are true and proven, and you have no problems. You've got so many problems with evolution, I could lay them out all night long and you wouldn't be able to keep up. You've got so many problems. And just like from the very beginning, I told everybody, you'll make lots of claims, but you have no proof for any of it. None. And you don't. You don't have any.
It seems to be you who's doing that. You're the one who's doing that, though.
And I have a question to ask you. Are horses and donkeys the same species?
Well, I would say they are.
You would say they are, but scientists don't say they are. Are tigers and lions the same species?
I don't care what they say they are. I care about the definition that we have before us, the 300-year-old definition.
Are tigers and lions the same species?
This definition is only a problem for evolutionists.
Yeah, are lions and tigers the same species?
It's only yes, according to the biological definition.
Okay, so you think tigers and lions are the same species? Can I just focus on, okay, maybe I got something wrong, but you actually think and will try and defend that lions and tigers are the same species?
If you're going to say that they're not like creatures that have the ability to interbreed and produce fertile offspring, fine, believe that. But the definition of species, biological definition of species, that's exactly what it is. So if you want to differ on definitions, that's fine, differ. If you want to differ on classification, differ. But I'm just pointing out, you have to make adjustments because you're trying to defend evolution. We don't have to make it. We don't have to.
We agreed on the species definition, though. I thought we agreed on the definition.
We don't have.
Thought you did.
I want to give in a brief once you conclude this point that you're making, Eric. I want to give Mark and Atheist Junior a chance, and then we definitely have to see if Sal is still.
Yeah, I think Sal.
So we've left him out for a while.
I'm so sorry, Sal.
Don't want to be a 2-on-1 debate.
Yeah, that's a bit.
If you want to wrap up that point, Eric.
Sure. Let me just point out that, just like I said in the beginning, it's the onus is on them to prove that evolution is true. And they're full of claims. They're full of claims. And I have something here I want to put into chat.
While you do that, we'll kick it over to Mark and Atheist Junior.
Yeah, I think that sort of saying, oh, well, you require absolute proof, and there's these kind of things that are, you've got to go back and DNA test Archaeopteryx, but can't be DNA tested, and things like this is just, it's kind of just a tap dancing. All we can do is present strong evidence for evolution and why. And of course, like, we're not geneticists or evolutionary biologists. They can certainly present it in much greater detail and much stronger than we can. But we can just present the strong evidence we have from multiple different lines why we think that evolution is true, which I think we have done. Now, it sounds to me, and I may be incorrect, that for religious and sort of I touched on miracles earlier to get the ERVs into different genomes. They don't want to believe the evidence that's in front of them, and that's their decision. But all we can do is present the incredibly strong evidence that's out there. AJ?
Yeah, I mean, if I can just list really quickly, if it's on us to provide evidence for evolution, then we have different fields that not only confirm evolution, but also cross-confirm evolution, like anatomy, molecular biology, biogeography, like where we find different animals living on Earth and where their fossils are, and the fossils themselves. And I gave an example of what I think is direct observation of evolution with the single-celled algae going to multicellular.
Yeah, and the thing is that all of these lines of evidence converge on one answer. It isn't just we take one by itself and say, hey, that's the smoking gun or the big thing kind of thing. There's strong evidence and there's weaker evidence, but they all converge on one answer. And that's the strength of the evolutionary theory, that it has multiple lines that all give the same answer. And you're sort of just saying, well, it's got nothing to do with one another and I don't believe it. Well, that's fine, but the evidence is out there.
No, I'm not saying that at all, my friend. What I'm saying is you have an observation, you have a hypothesis, but it's untestable. You cannot test any of your hypotheses. And then you go around calling them facts. That's where I have a problem with your side. You're not being intellectually honest. You're calling your hypothesis. You're saying, because I developed this hypothesis, or somebody else developed it, and I'm holding to it, because we hold to this hypothesis, that is a test as to whether or not this is true. Well, that's not what a test is, my friend. That's the hypothesis you have built on an observation, and it's untestable.
Is my mic working?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So.
Regarding the transition supposedly from single cell to multi-cell, that could be a transgenerational plasticity. I'll give you an example of a multicellular organism becoming a single-celled organism. That is the canine transmissible venereal tumor. We had a full dog express a cancerous tumor, and now it's a single-celled parasite that transmits between dogs. We do not expect that to ever evolve back into a fully functional dog.
Why not?
So there are plenty of examples where evolution is reductive, where it's lost of function, and that's a good example right there. And to cite that algae thing as macroevolution, we actually may not have have a large enough sample size to see if it had these transgenerational plasticities. There are probably better terms that people use, but that's the problem. Regarding independent origins, if the Earth is young, if the fossil record is young, and that would be young Earth creationism, just on scientific evidence alone, I've asked evolutionary biologists, will there be enough time for universal common ancestry? They'll say no. So therefore, the similarity has to be because of common design, not common descent. Young Earth creationism, and I've said this, it's still hard. We have a way to go to make a scientific case for that. The alternative would be something like progressive or old Earth creationism. So that does raise the question, if it's young Earth, why are we so similar to other creatures? I have posited that these other creatures are model organisms. We help understand human biology by having a progression of creatures all the way from bacteria to chimpanzees. That's why we do medical research using bacteria to understand our own genome. We use yeast to understand chromatin. We use nematodes and other creatures to understand our nervous system, et cetera, et cetera. So I would just say it's common design, and it's a testable prediction. Young Earth creationism has some testable predictions, like the decaying magnetic field. If that is vindicated, maybe not in my lifetime, but in certainly civilization's lifetime, that would lend credence that these are independent origins. So just because evolution succeeds in some predictions doesn't mean it can't be falsified by all these other ones. That's how geocentrism failed as a hypothesis. Geocentric models correctly predicted eclipses and lots of other things in seasons, but it was fundamentally wrong because of the anomalous things. I've tried to provide some evidences of what are anomalous in evolutionary theory. Thank you.
I want to give a
you went
chance
over
to Atheist Junior and Mark, but giving everybody maybe a 2 to 5 minute warning before we go into the Q&A. But go ahead, Mark and Atheist Junior.
Yeah, your problem there, Sal, is you're sort of saying evolution wouldn't expect multicellular to single cell, and that's not the case. Evolution expects whatever is fittest for its environment. Doesn't say that the aim of life is to get to multicellularity. It doesn't say that that's the best for the environment. That may well be the case, but that's not necessarily so. So yes, multicellular to single cell is an example of evolution. It has evolved to gain some benefit. Now, it might have lost functionality in some ways, but if that is beneficial for the organism, it will be selected for. So when you do sort of say these things, you've got to not misrepresent what evolution actually posits as its hypothesis. Now, you touched on the waiting time problem. There isn't enough time for things to evolve over time. You touched upon that. But the problem here is creationists want to see mutations happen in series, one after another, after another, after another. And then they say, oh, there can't possibly be enough time. The problem with that is that mutations don't happen that neatly in a serial pattern, one after the other, after the other, after the other. They happen in parallel, in populations. So some of the population might have, sort of some mutations, some population might have, part of the population might have other mutations, and then recombination sort of makes them work in parallel as it goes down. So nobody except creationists say that there's a problem with the amount of time. And I'm not sure what the decaying magnetic field has to do with this. I think that's completely off the topic, and I'm not that familiar with the decay of the magnetic field. I think that in order to show that a decaying magnetic field has some sort of impact on mutation and population, then you would certainly have to show, do more than make the claim that is so. And granted, you did say that might be later on, but I would love to see something, sort of experimented on about that. Do you have anything to add, AJ?
Yeah. I will. You'll notice that when I brought up my algae example, they didn't go from single to multicellular just for no reason. There's something called a selection pressure, which was the introduction of a predator into their environment. And the example you brought up with the parasite is interesting. I don't know if going single cellular made it easier for it to transmit to another host or not, but that is an interesting sort of parallel. But these type of changes, they're not going to happen unless there's a selection pressure, unless there's some sort of advantage to be gained. You're not going to see changes like this. So they're not going to just happen for an arbitrary reason, which I think a lot of creationists ask, like, why doesn't a turtle grow wings or something like that instead of getting a longer neck to reach vegetation? Well, it's because it already has a neck, so it's easier for it to just change the structure it already has rather than completely grow a new structure like this. And I'm not really familiar either with the decaying magnetic field, but we might actually see the magnetic field flip in our lifetime. So that's interesting, but I'm done.
Opportunity, we're going to jump into the Q&A, folks. Want to say thanks so much for your questions, and want to remind you our guests are linked in the description. That includes that the podcast, you can find their links down below. If you didn't know, folks, our debates end up on the Modern Day Debate podcast, available at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and find podcasts everywhere. And we put our guest links in the description box there in case you'd like to learn more about their views. What are you waiting for? Click those links. With this first question coming in from, do appreciate it, Derpenheimer says, what could someone do to falsify evolution?
I'll take that. It depends on how you define it. If you define it by common ancestry, the way to falsify common ancestry is if we find evidence the Earth is young. And even evolutionary biologists will say there's just simply not enough time. The patterns of similarity would then be attributable to acts of special creation, and that's how it could be falsified. I referred to the magnetic field decay. There are other evidences for a young Earth. That is one of them. That's a very complex topic, and I'll be the first to admit that even though I will make the case for a young Earth, I think we have a long way to go to prove it. I personally believe it is young.
Got it. Thanks very much for your question. Do appreciate it. Joe Schwartz says, what will the next stage of human evolution look like, and why aren't we there yet?
Well, the humans sort of have interrupted, and a lot of papers sort of say we've interrupted the evolutionary process because detrimental mutations that come up, they're not being weeded out like they would in nature due to medicine and our changes of environment. So I think the next stage in human evolution will maybe be a theoretical one, sort of manipulating DNA directly. But it's sort of impossible to tell. It supposes a whole lot and supposes a whole massive stuff of the way that humanity goes. But I personally think that direct genetic manipulation will be the next evolution of humans, intentional evolution.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating topic. So evolution and so organisms are sort of plastic to their environment. So I've always wondered, and I don't think this is something that I could see the changes in my lifetime, but how the invention of the internet and how it's become so critical to people's lives might actually affect human evolution, because it's changed our environment, our lifestyles so much to where people are a lot more insular and sedentary. And I also have to wonder about the sort of meta effect of, once you become aware of evolution, does that also have some sort of effect on it? Like Mark said, directly changing DNA, and then it raises all type of moral questions about, is it right to alter the genome of your baby before it's born? Stuff like that, taking out possibly genetic disorders and stuff like that, which I'm all for. But I think it's a very interesting topic, but I would have to say that I don't know, personally.
You got it. And thank you very much for this question coming in from Sunflower. Says, Mark, on ERVs, which, can you remind me? I remember it's retroviruses.
Endogenous retroviruses.
Endogenous, that's right. So,
yeah.
Mark, on ERVs, you're not allowed to invoke quote-unquote likelihood or probability. When confronted with the fine-tuning argument and the entailed improbability, you and your ilk just hand-wave it. Be consistent.
Well, the fine-tuning problem is sort of addressed because we have there's theories or hypothesis rather to get around it, like multiverse theory, for instance. And the problem here is that we know there's only one way that retrovirus can get into every cell in the organism's body. We know that there's millions of target sites it could choose, and yet it's the same target site through every single instance in those organisms. For, as I said, between humans and chimps, for instance, 205 of them. I don't know, and you have to say probability when you're talking about a virus inserting itself somewhere in the DNA. I'm not sure how you would get around that, how you would say, hey, it chooses the site. It doesn't. We know that it doesn't because we are familiar with retroviruses. HIV is a retrovirus and it doesn't choose. And this is just not how they work. So unfortunately, you're sort of comparing apples and oranges here. And nobody says that you can't address the probability and fine tuning. It just says that there are defeaters for the probability question in fine tuning.
You don't think DNA is designed to store certain things in certain areas?
I don't think it's designed at all.
Yeah, I don't think it's designed at all. That I agree with AJ. I don't think it's designed, and I don't think it's designed to store viruses. No.
You certainly have a lot of scientists that disagree with you. But okay, let me ask you something. What is the...
just to stick with the audience questions, I do want to give Mark a chance to give any sort of response.
Yeah, to that. I don't know what scientists say that DNA is designed to store viruses. That I would like to see that citation.
This one from Oflamio says, what is your definition of time? I suppose all speakers this could be for all of you.
Thank you for your question. I would say time is an undefined. In mathematics and physics, we have entities that are undefined. That means you don't define it succinctly. It's only really understood by examining the whole system. So thank you for the question.
Well, I would say that when it comes to physics, you don't really separate time and space. You combine them in a mathematical model that combines the 3 dimensions of space and the 1 dimension of time into like a 4-dimensional manifold. And time itself, I guess it would just be a linear sort of sequence of events that we can only experience going one way. But that's our own interpretation of it. So that could be wrong.
Yeah, I agree with AJ on the space-time, and I think that it is sort of poorly defined. And our understanding of space-time is really just getting off the ground floor at the moment. But yeah, that's good enough for me.
You got it. Anybody else? This one coming in from Cameron Hall says, creationists, since Homo sapiens are great apes, how did we speciate in 6,000 years?
In the first place, I'm an old Earth creationist. In the second place, 6,000 years, the Bible nowhere says that man has only been here for 6,000 years, nor does it say anywhere that this Earth is 6,000 years old. Never makes any such statement. So, no, that just... And besides, that question has nothing to do with proving that evolution is true at all. As a matter of fact, I would go so far as to say that there's no time for evolution. And science has proven this. Modern, accepted, scientific experimentation, and I can put it right in front of you right now, that shows you, beyond any shadow of any doubt, that there's no time for the Pakicetus to evolve into a whale. There's no time for a common ancestor to evolve into a monkey and a chimp. It's simply not possible.
Sal, any thoughts?
I think they were specially created. I used to be a theistic evolutionist, then became an old Earth creationist, then a young Earth creationist. I worked for a top genetic engineer, retired Cornell research professor, John C. Sanford. And I think the evidence is consistent that the human genome is deteriorating very fast. Even an evolutionary biologist by the name of Kondrashov said, rhetorically asked, why aren't we dead 100 times over? So I don't think the human species could have been here very long. Therefore, we were specially created by a miraculous act. That is also a testable prediction as far as genetic deterioration. Some evolutionary biologists think that we're not going to last long, and we can also test within, like, say, the next few generations whether we're getting dumber and sicker, which also seems to be the case.
Any thoughts? Okay, this one coming in from Do Appreciate It. Bitter Truth says, question to believers, why are living organisms genetically close to each other? Don't you think they all have a common ancestor? If not, explain why not.
Dr. Craig Venter, the foremost geneticist in the world, says there is no tree of life of common descent. It's an artifact of old science that hasn't worked out. And if Dr. Craig Venter, the world's foremost geneticist in the world that has actually written on his own computer DNA and injected it into a E. coli bacteria cell and watched it come to life and replicate. If he says it, I'm not going to argue with him. It doesn't exist.
I don't think there's one specific person who's like the best geneticist in the world. Science doesn't really have authority figures like that are just the one best person at genetics. So,
well, he's the one that so many people would love to have worked for him.
He actually worked with Francis Collins, who headed up the Human Genome Project, and Francis Collins absolutely says that evolution is real. So I'm not sure what his stance on it, but his colleagues seem to disagree with him.
Yeah, and if
Richard Dawkins disagreed with him too, but he didn't argue with him.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention, is that him and Richard Dawkins have disagreed on the tree of life, but I would bet you that both of them agree that evolution itself happened and is continuing to happen. So there are disagreements about the specifics in the field of evolutionary biology, but that doesn't mean that scientists think that it's not true.
I'll tell you why I believe that there are patterns of similarity and diversity. And this is actually in some of my published work on protein biology. It's very complicated stuff. But fundamentally, if we didn't have other creatures, we would not be able to research ourselves. Marshall Nierenberg, who won the Nobel Prize, was able to figure out the genetic code by studying bacteria. It would have been brutal to try to start off with something as complex as a human being. So this progression of forms enables the scientific method. It's great that we don't have to dissect baby human fetuses. We can do this with pigs. So I think these are provided by the designer to help us. So we can either look at this as the similarities as due to common ancestry or as a gift of common design that helps us do science. I prefer the latter.
This one coming in from, do appreciate your question. Summer, good to see you, says Sal. The idea that biology is maximized towards efficiency is a false concept, even in theory. Look at the structure of the kidney, for example. It needs to filter water through it multiple times, and even then there is still waste.
Thank you very much for that comment. Evolutionary biologists have just a habit of just sticking their foot in their mouth, like Jerry Coyne, and talking about bad design. It's the biophysicists that are saying biology is optimized. It's more perfect than we imagine. You can go on my channel. I have a recording of William Bielek of either Princeton or Yale, and he gave the Hans Bethe lecture, and he said, the way biology is optimized, it's so good we can't even match it. It's at the edge of physics. So it just depends on what you mean, what the criteria you apply for good or bad. But in terms of some things like sensory organs and energy efficiency and et cetera and timing, it is at the maximum. Just look at that and you have a different perception. And I will point out, Jerry Coyne said the retina was poorly wired. He used this bad design argument until the physicists said these things are great waveguides. It is exceptional. Anyone who's worked with waveguides and electrical engineering and electromagnetic theory, their jaw drops at this. So it depends on who you ask, who will say it's good or bad. But I'll tell you the technology in biology on many levels exceeds anything we can do, such as the ability of sharks to sense electric fields. Thank you very much for the question.
You got it. This one coming in from Stupid Whore Energy. She's back. She says, didn't Topo 2 likely begin as DNA cleaver that evolved the ability to do strand passage? Type IB is an example. They are related to recombination proteins. You get a working topo from a nuclease by a single amino acid change.
I have to dispute that. By the way, Miss Energy, nice to see you. One of my favorite people. The problem with using endonucleases is you can invoke that, but then how do you stitch things back together? So an endonuclease can cut. It doesn't untangle and it doesn't reconnect. So just assuming that you have, you can evolve a topo for something that's just a cutter, where's the ligation happening? Where is the untangling happening? Where's the sensing of the knot? So one mutation, it's like, well, which one? Because I can identify several that if it's not there, the topo doesn't work.
You got it, Ann. Thank you very much for your question. This one coming in from, thanks for your super sticker, Ian Davenport. And Bitter Truth says, green anoles evolved in 15 years. Look, whale pelvis, hip joint, testes, hair, long fingers, underwings. Isn't this evolution? How can you decline fact? Eric or Sal?
Okay, you have to repeat that. I'm sorry.
He said green anoles evolved in 15 years. Look, whale. I don't even know what anoles. Have you guys ever heard of this word?
They're like lizards.
Oh, thank you. Said they evolved in 15 years. Look, whale has a pelvis. I think they're saying, like, if you look at alleged whale transitionary fossils, try to stay as neutral as possible. They say whale pelvis.
No, modern ones, they have sort of the remnants of a pelvic bone.
Okay, they say whale pelvis / hip joint / testes, hair / long fingers. Under wings. Isn't this evolution? How can you decline fact?
I'd like to see it evolved in 15 years.
Oh, they were
Likewise.
saying anoles did.
Appreciate the reference. I've never heard of anything like that. And then the other thing is you can't count out transgenerational plasticity. So characterizing transgeneral plasticity as the result of random mutation in natural selection That's not right. And we need to study this more, because a lot of things that were claimed to be natural selection and random mutation ended up to be environmentally sensed plasticity. So this is a more complex topic, and evolutionary biologists have a way of just botching up the data and attributing it to something, and then it gets overturned by future information.
This one from Bitter Truth says, evolution is giving us a model. If you reject, then what is your model? How universe was created, including living organisms?
I don't want to take it.
Miracle of God.
Yeah, a miracle of God. You know, there's something to be said for this, too. Mark brought up the second chromosome as evidence for evolution. And they keep saying, well, this is evidence of fusion. This is and because it was fused, this has to be evolution. Well, I disagree with that. It's not proof of evolution. It's proof that a chromosome fused, which happens all the time. Now, what I find interesting for the creationist is that this is the second chromosome. And what my opponents may not be aware of is what the second chromosome actually represents and controls. It controls higher intelligence and coordination. Now, why is this important? Because when you look at the Bible, and God created mankind.
Just because forgive me, but just because I can't remember how it was related to the let's see.
It wasn't.
I'll give you a little bit to finish up, but then I do want to also, because you addressed one of Mark's points earlier. Once you finish up, I do want to give Mark a chance to actually respond.
Okay. Well, when you get to this point, and you look at the second chromosome and what it actually does, when God created man in His own image, and created him specifically to subdue the world, to take charge of everything around him, make the world his. He was going to be in charge. He was going to overtake the entire planet, be in charge of all the animals, and that's exactly what the second chromosome would have controlled. It gives him the ability to do this. And I'm telling you, I think that this right here is more evidence for special creation than it is for anything else, because that's exactly what we've done. We are in a total class of our own. We're not like other animals. We are gods on this earth compared to the other animals.
You got it. We'll give Mark a chance to respond because you addressed his point earlier.
Yeah, and so this whole thing is sort of a bit weird. Okay, so chromosome 2 fusion, I pointed out why we believe that they are fused. It's very strange for someone to sort of go, oh, well, it was an act of God, after going on and on and on about unfalsifiable claims, and then provides the most unfalsifiable claim you could ever make in your entire lifetime, which is a supernatural being use some sort of magic to make it happen so that humans could rule the earth. How exactly would one go about falsifying that? It's ironic, I think, and quite sort of hypocritical to be so bold to make a claim like that after going on and on and on about unfalsifiable claims. So I mean, we presented the evidence that they did fuse. We've presented the evidence that the telomeres and the centromeres. For somebody to just go back and say, well, it was God, I don't think that's a very good answer, and I think that it doesn't address the question at all, which is what model do we have? Because just saying God has no explanatory power. It doesn't explain anything. It's not a model.
We have so many questions, Eric. I hate to do this, but just because we have so many questions, we have to keep moving. Guy with the hair says, Eric says, quote, it's an unfalsifiable claim. It's science fiction. By Eric's logic, the alternative claim of a creator or God is science fiction, as it's also unfalsifiable.
Well, I'm glad that he brought that up. You see, here's the point. Do you see the double standard here? It's okay for my opponents to do this. It's okay for the atheist side to do this. It's okay for the evolutionists to do this when that's all they have to offer. The only thing they have to offer are claims that they cannot prove. Just blatant claims. And they'll sit here and admit they can't prove it. And then they'll say science doesn't prove anything. In fact, in spite of the fact that Science proves things every single day. It just does. Their science doesn't prove anything.
Yeah, that's not what I said. I would like to just take this opportunity to add something on the last question. It's just I wasn't aware that chromosomes allow us to have higher functions. I thought that was the neocortex of our brain. I thought chromosomes just assisted DNA replication.
You don't know what the second chromosome is responsible for, and I would
only the second one.
I would suspect Googling it.
Okay,
I would advise you to Google.
I'd just like to add just very quickly that evolution isn't an atheist thing. There's plenty of evolutionary biologists, geneticists, all people working in the evolutionary field, which are theists. They believe in a God. So
the difference is, as a creationist, I choose to believe in creation because I've studied evolution. As an atheist, you are forced to accept that evolution is true. Otherwise,
that's not true. I don't have to accept evolution.
Of course you do.
No, I don't.
You have to.
I do have so many questions. I do want to get to as many questions as we can before we run out of time. This one from Standing for... Oh, we got that one. Bitter Truth says, evolution based on empirical evidence. What about religion? Just belief without any evidence. How can we believe in fake ideology and blindly follow it? Sal, if you have any thoughts?
I'm going to break with my creationist and ID fellows. I would say the idea of God is outside of testable science. We can use scientific arguments in favor of creation. That means evidence against evolution, evidence against abiogenesis is evidence in favor of creation. Even Ernst Haeckel said, at least as far as what he called spontaneous generation, is if we don't have it, then we have to our only recourse is supernatural creation. So the thing about evolution is I've just shown all these things where where evolutionary biologists have to accept that it happens naturally. That is according to ordinary laws of physics and chemistry. And that is not supported empirically. So it's like there's plenty of faith as far as believing in evolutionary biology and its major claims that this happens naturally and well within ordinary laws of physics and chemistry. And one of those where it fails is in the transition from prokaryote to eukaryote. And this is a very complex thing. Most people don't study this. That's why I'm trying to bring attention to it. You'll see that you'll need miracles of special creation if you invoke universal common ancestry. And at what point do statistical miracles, if we can infer it, when will that, how improbable does it have to be before you'll accept that it's a miracle of God?
I would. Sorry, go ahead, James. Sorry.
I'll give you just because there haven't been a lot of questions for you, I'll give you a chance really quick, Mark.
Okay. Well, I disagree with just the dichotomy. I understand what you're saying, Sal, that disproving evolution would point towards a miracle. I get what you're saying, but that's a false dichotomy. The reason why is because there can be other things postulated, like aliens coming down and building these things at certain times. That isn't a God. So the problem here is that you're raising a false dichotomy, evolution or God, where the options are evolution or not evolution. And that's your problem. You're trying to insert a God into a dichotomy that is not there. And I don't believe in that explanation either. I sincerely believe in evolution, but that's your problem. You can't just assume God because not evolution.
Well, there's something else that y'all are assuming that you can't assume, and that is there's more to God than just that. There is also the fact that we know God. Some of us do, anyway. We have actual experience with God. I could ask you, do you know your parents? How do you know you had parents? Well, you have experience with your parents. You have conversations with your parents. You may have eaten with your parents. I have experience with God. I've had experience with God all my life. I've seen God. I've heard God. I've talked to God. God has spoken to me. Now, some people might ridicule that, and that's okay. They're entitled not to believe me if they don't want to. But that's the difference between us. Some of us do, in fact, know God, but none of you, in fact, know evolution occurred. And you sure can't prove it.
Any thoughts, Atheist Junior, before we go to the question? We haven't heard much from you either.
Well, I'm not even going to touch that one, but I think there might be a nugget of truth to what Sal was saying, that with evolutionary biology, specifically paleontology, there are large gaps where we kind of have to sort of fill in our own explanations that may or may not be right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should go to a fallacy like God of the gaps instead. Now, I think the foundations of the field, like of paleontology, are based in science to where we can make these assumptions and guesses. They're educated guesses, but filling in those blanks with a God did it, I don't think is a better method than just making these educated guesses.
Gotta run to the next one. I hate to do this, but just because I'm trying to get Mark and Atheist Junior in, because there aren't a lot of questions for them, so that's why I've got to run to the next one. This one, appreciate your question. This one from Stupid Whore Energy says, isn't the fact that ERVs are solo LTRs and the result of recombination and deletion events of full-length proviral genomes support common ancestry?
No. Long terminal repeats. Thank you for your question, Miss Energy. And I always do shows that collect her questions because she asks good ones. The fact that ERVs are seeming to be positioned in just the right locations to be able to do what we call gene regulation through the 4D nucleome suggests that these are not random insertions. There may be some, but the majority would have to be for coordinated function. And then again, I refer to the Google Sternberg-Collins paradox. You'll see my description of this. You'll also see what happens is you have things like the zinc finger Cap1 complex that docks on these things and does gene regulation, sometimes possibly even transchromosomally. So I reject the idea that these are random insertions. We're finding more function for these the more that we study. So at the very least, it's premature. And whenever evolutionary biologists says it's a mistake, history has proven them wrong. And I'm not going to bet that they're going to be right. They'll be wrong again on that. But thank you for the question.
And the fact of the genome itself, the fact that it is mapped is proof that specific parts of the DNA are made specifically to perform specific functions, and that would be including storing of retroviruses.
Give a chance to Atheist Junior. Mark, if you had anything to add before we go to the next one.
No, not really. Although, I think I'm not familiar with this paradox. I'll certainly read up on it, but I don't think Sternberg is well regarded after he did put this out, as far as I'm aware. Maybe Sal can enlighten us on that one.
Yeah, we could just move on.
You got it. And thank you very much for your question, or your support, I should say. Standing for Truth says, keep up the great work, James, my man. Appreciate your support. As well as Alyosha, thanks for your huge support. Says, thanks for hosting this. Thank you. And thank you to our guests, as well as everybody for your questions. That makes the Q&A. But also, our guests are linked in the description. They are the lifeblood of the channel. We highly encourage you to check out their links. If you haven't, what are you waiting for? Their links are basically waiting for you right now, including if you're at the podcast. Pure Aussie Gold says, just to embarrass me, 2 tickets to the gun show on Tag Team Tuesday. Amazing. Thanks for your support. And this one coming in from Bitter Truth says, why human and chimpanzee chromosomes are similar? Question to believers. Why we have genetic similarity with chimpanzees?
The answer is to optimize scientific discoverability. And by the way, I'm going to have an after show just to so I could be a little, I could address some of the audience questions a little bit more in detail. So it's on my channel. That's a lot of self-promotion there, but I do want to honor that question. I will address it in my after show. But the fact that we have model organisms where we don't have to sacrifice human fetuses, instead we could do these terrible, cruel experiments to mice, etc., that's a gift of God. And every Christian that is a theistic evolutionist, I just tell you, you ought to be thinking about maybe that it was specially created for your sake that we don't have to do things like embryonic stem cell research on human fetuses.
You got it. This one coming in from, do appreciate your question. Sunflower says, for what it's worth, I have a bachelor's in biochem. I am far more qualified and educated on this topic than AJ and Mark combined. Jeez. I don't know who you're going to win over with that. But anyway,
that's not a question.
Thanks, Sunflower.
Neither of those were questions. So
that's true.
Well, that's okay. That's all right. But thanks for your, pointing out my lack of credentials, Sunflower. I think I did bring that up at the start, but thanks for reinforcing that there. I think Sal is the only one, unless Eric does have some kind of degree in biochem. I think aren't you a biomechanical engineer, Sal? I do apologize. I can't remember your credentials.
I don't even know where that came from. Sunflower, I get it.
Sunflower's just, a bit angry, I think. I'm not sure. I love you, Sunflower. I really do.
Slightly pedantic. But this one coming in from Derpenheimer says, this one, Bitter Truth says, why chimpanzee chromosome 2A and 2B similar to human chromosome? I think you basically addressed this, Sal. Do you feel like you have?
Just my previous answer, and thank you very much for the super chat and the question. These are great questions. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to comment on a previous question. This one's really similar, but the reason that humans and chimps have genetic similarities is because humans, chimps, and bonobos descended from a common ancestor like 6 or 7 million years ago. So we're closely related.
Which common ancestor?
An ape.
That's the claim. Which common ancestor?
I don't know the specific one, but it doesn't really matter.
It's just a claim that you can't even point to one and say that's it. Much less have something testable. You just make a claim and throw it out there as fact. In other words, that's scientifically irresponsible.
Okay.
In fairness, this isn't a scientific paper. This is just a debate, Eric.
In fairness, Mark, this is exactly what you used with the fellow that you and he discussed dinosaurs. And I'm actually, I thought you had a good point there. 3 different times I could point them out. I've got the timestamps from the video on your site where you were debating the fellow on dinosaurs. And you simply said that you can't look at these things and just make a claim and call that scientific. You said that 3 different times. And
I can point to articles and papers that sort of say what the common ancestor is. It's Pleobates. But they're what we're pointing to. We're not just making the claim in a vacuum with nothing to point to.
Yes,
this is the problem.
Show it to us.
Okay. What? I'll go get it out of my backyard. I'm not sure what you're expecting here.
This one coming. Yeah, I hate to do this. We got to move forward. Snake was right. Friend of the channel. I think you guys. Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of you guys have crossed swords with Snake was right before. Says Sal, if tornadoes actually. You guys are perverts. Says if tornadoes actually selected junk for functional structure, then shouldn't we expect them to make cars?
That's exactly the point is that they wouldn't. So the premise is false. There's no reason. The point is no reason to pursue it further. So the thing is, as far as evolution goes, there's a lot of randomizing there if we talk about random mutations. And I was trying to point to the diagrams. I know that some people don't like that thing where I said cars. The point is geometry. You have to have connecting parts. Biology works because you have connecting parts. They're much more precise than anything we would do with cars as far as geometry and the connectivity. You need to have charge distributions so that they match, where the positive matches the negative on the corresponding part. This is very difficult to put together. So the tornado is a figure of speech for the randomizing actions of whatever goes on in the process of reproduction. It's just not going to make coordinated structures, particularly multimeric proteins.
You got it, and thank you very much for this question coming in from Stupid Horror Energy says, in endosymbiosis, there is going to be an intermediate stage where the gene will be in both genomes. The cell has a chance to evolve to control a copy from the nucleus without losing the function in the mitochondria.
The problem with the endosymbiotic hypothesis, and I covered it in one debate before, is that 85% of the mitochondrial genome is in the nuclear, is in the nucleus. So you have all these transport issues. Oh, that's the other thing. The membrane-bound nucleus is very problematic, and endosymbiosis does not solve that. So again, one of the problems, as I mentioned, it was nuclear localization. So endosymbiosis, even if you assume it as contributing to eukaryotic evolution, it really doesn't explain the fundamental salient features of eukaryotic components, such as membrane-bound organelles, and then other things like spliceosomes, et cetera, et cetera.
This one from Appreciate It, Bitter Truth says, Bible says the earth is flat with the sun orbiting earth, and that God made this world in 6 days, and God made plants first, and then the sun. Do you believe in this question to the believers?
That's not what the Bible says.
I don't believe in a flat earth. I do believe in a young earth, maybe less than 10,000 years. Thank you. Thank you for the question, everybody.
You got it. And this one coming in from Do Appreciate Your Question, Contrarian420 says, evolution requires, quote, an initial replicator. No.
Yeah, I mean, it does. But that abiogenesis is not part of evolutionary theory. That doesn't mean it's not important. It's a very important field of science. But
according to Berkeley, that's not so.
Just let AJ finish.
Agreed.
No, I mean, I'm pretty much done. But that's all I wanted to say.
Bubble.
Yeah, I would agree with AJ, and I just want to mention that abiogenesis isn't as well fleshed out as evolution. We know some of the steps to abiogenesis. It's not abiogenesis theory because we haven't got that level of evidence that evolution has. So we're a bit fuzzier on abiogenesis, and that's perfectly fine. There's a number of hypotheses about how it came forward, and there's much disagreement about it. But it's fascinating nonetheless, and hopefully we can shed more light on it as tests go on in labs. Thank you.
This one from Bubblegum Gun says, Snake was right, wants to debate me, set it up. Well, maybe. Email me. Bitter Truth says, God made it isn't a good explanation and only a story, but not a model. Is this because God failed?
I do agree with the idea that it's not a model, because I think it's more of an ad hoc explanation after the fact rather than trying to use hypotheses based on phenomena and observations and then making predictions and doing experiments and seeing if those predictions come true versus just explaining things after the fact by saying God did it.
Is God failed? He's referencing the flood, maybe? I don't know. It's not my question. Sorry. I'll let the others answer.
The creationist model does lead to some testable predictions, such as decaying genomes. This is verifiable. If the genomes, not just of humans, but of other creatures, are losing complexity, this would indicate that evolution really never worked in the first place. If you just Google reductive evolution, and there's even a paper by Eugene Koonin that the major mode of evolution, the dominant mode, is reductive evolution, and then they have these unexplained bursts of complexity. So that's indistinguishable from miracles. So this does lead to testable predictions depending on which creationist model you have. And we'll see this play out. And right now, the empirical evidence is not favoring evolution. I just saw a paper in 2017 by Lenski as a co-author, lead author Kochi, that the genome decays despite fitness gains. And this was in E. coli bacteria. We may be seeing the biosphere slowly losing complexity. This would be inconsistent with naturalistic evolution. So I think it is, depending, God did it is not a specific model, but we could say miraculous actions plus genomic decay is a testable model. Thank you for the question.
Yeah,
Bitter
we don't
truth.
see that genomic decay. Don't see that in the mayfly experiments that have been going on 100 years. We don't see that in the product of Lenski Labs. We see some loss in function, but not the decay that you're talking about.
As far as the sciences are
2017 paper.
I want to jump to this next one because we have a number yet. Bitter Truth says evidence against evolution, but where is that evidence? In other words, like what types of evidence is there against evolution, Sal and Eric?
there is no evidence for that evolution is a thing anyway. At least nothing provable.
But
the only thing that evolution has been able to, the evolutionist side has been able to show tonight, is that they have observations, they have built hypotheses on, and then they claim that that is proof, their hypothesis.
I think they're asking though, like, is there evidence against it rather than just a lack of evidence for it?
All kinds of it.
I provided some examples. I even quoted Dr. Dan Stern-Cardinal that talked about independent protein origins. So where do these independent major protein families come from? And I pointed out that this would be indistinguishable from miracles for some of the major ones, particularly multimeric proteins.
This from Bill Hugger says, could Eric or Sal explain why males have nipples?
I can't explain that. I don't study. I'm not that fascinated by male nipples.
This one, Eric? Okay, this
the question.
Bitter
Really?
Truth.
They're so fascinating. What are you talking about? Come on, Sal. Admit it. Admit it to the world. Come on.
This one from Bitter Truth says, did you meet God? Can I get his address or can you show us God? Eric.
Not only can I show you that belief in God is less absurd than belief in abiogenesis and evolution.
I think that would be doxing. I think that might count as doxing.
I can prove that, let's look at this, okay? First of all, abiogenesis. You have abiogenesis and then you have biogenesis. Now, evolutionists don't want to claim abiogenesis is part of evolution. But in order for life to evolve into the myriad forms we have today, life had to evolve into life in the first place. And if you go to Berkeley, I can put this on screen share. I'm looking at it right now. Berkeley University, from their Evolution 101 course, From Soup to Cells, The Origin of Life. So they talk about abiogenesis being the beginning of evolution. Now, think about what we observe. What do we observe? Do we observe life randomly forming? No. Have we observed it in nature? No. Have we observed it in the lab? No. What have we observed? What we actually observe, every living organism that you can point to through time to now, every single one, the trillions upon trillions upon trillions, have been brought about through another life that existed before them. Never before have we witnessed in the lab or in nature anything randomly forming and popping to life. It just doesn't happen. So you believe in the absurd when you believe in abiogenesis. Biogenesis is the observation that life only comes from life. Intelligence only comes from intelligence. Consciousness only comes from consciousness. And that is all we observe. So if you extrapolate that back, there had to be a power that brought forth the first things, the first life. Now, when you go then to quantum physics, okay, the double slit experiment.
To move forward.
Yeah, I think we're getting off topic.
This one.
No, this is not off topic. This is.
Let me go back to the question just to be sure, because I was. This
Something about
is. Can you show us God? Or
Yes.
can you give us God's address? I don't even know if that was a sincere question, but this one we got to jump into the next one. The Crawdaddy 029 says, "Oh look, two armchair anti-science nonsense hole pickers that have no Nobel Prize for turning evolution on its head. Go figure. How do you like them apples, Eric and
Jeez.
Sal?" It's
Yeah,
more of
well,
a.
There was a Nobel Prize winner by the name of Richard Smalley that rejected evolution, and I expect there are going to be more.
Yeah, says Eric. I'm just all right. This is coming in from. I'm just teasing you, Eric. We appreciate. Want to remind you, folks. Guys are linked to the description. Eric and Sal and Mark and Atheist Junior. What are you waiting for? This one coming in from Bitter Truth says retroviruses use viral enzymes to copy their own genome, which is stored in an RNA transcript into DNA.
Was that a question?
I don't know if that was a question.
Some of these are. This is definitely intended for Sal and. It's more of an objection towards Sal. They're not always in the form of a question, but nonetheless,
Okay.
it is for Sal. And they said retroviruses use viral enzymes to copy their own genome, which is stored in an RNA transcript into DNA. Or I should say Sal or Eric, either of you.
This can account for some. So there's definitely some. There's some insertions for sure, definitely, but it doesn't account for all of them. And so this is just the general problem with we just see it emerge once and we get a mistake and we just assume all of these were kind of mistakes or insertions. But I was pointing out the problem of coordinating this to do things like where we had the 4D nucleome and the zinc finger cap1 complex and just a whole bunch of other things like phase transitions. This cannot be random. So just the fact that you find some examples of random insertions doesn't mean it explains it all. Not to mention, we don't actually know the origin of viruses. We think there is a theory that all viruses came from cellular life. Now that's very problematic because then the origin of viruses would then be from cellular life, and if cellular life is created, that's where the viruses came from to begin with. So thank you for the question.
This one coming in from Bitter Truth says evolution based upon observation and DNA. What is against it? I think there's kind of the same question they had earlier as what evidence against evolution. This one from Bitter Truth says, can you show us Adam and Eve fossils so I can reject evolution finally?
No, I can't show you Adam and Eve fossils.
You got it. And I think
Thank you for the super chat.
Might be the last ones.
We can show you Malachite Man, though, in the same 110 million year old strata as what the Velociraptor and T-Rex would have known.
You got it. And in case I missed anybody's question, please do let me know if you fired it in there and I didn't read it. But otherwise, I'm going to jump into the standard question from Diamond S. says, Craig Venter found a minimal genome. There were like 200 minimal proteins for a functioning cell. Any less and it wouldn't work. For Mark, how can you get 200 proteins at once?
Well, the whole assumption is that it sort of evolved into what modern does, that it didn't have any intermediate sort of stages and any other functionality beforehand. And we covered this, that there are not only proteins that had different functions, but they also had proteins that and DNA sequences you could take out, and they formed exactly the same. They operated exactly the same, maybe not at an optimum level. So the problem here that you're sort of making, the error that you're making, is saying this protein must form fully fleshed out, operating at an optimum level, and with every other protein interlinked. And that's not how they evaluate how these proteins developed. It's sort of they develop over time doing multiple different functions, and then they're co-opted into what they are today. And we have examples of that.
You got it.
AJ, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with Mark. DNA is redundant. You can take out or change multiple letters in a nucleotide sequence, and instead of killing the organism or having some really horrible effect, a lot of times it doesn't change anything. So I think in these type of questions, we usually assume that if any change is made to these type of proteins, that it's going to have some huge impact, but a lot of time it doesn't.
This one from the Crawdaddy. Sassy says, I like how the affirmative side, although, let's see, I don't know if, yeah, okay, they say, I like how the affirmative side is sitting quiet since all the defense has to come from the negative side. Maybe you'll actually learn evolution. I think that's for you, Sal and Eric. It's almost as sassy as, what was his name?
Well, thank you very much.
Sugar
Sunflower.
Cookie?
Thank you very much
can't
for the
remember.
question. I studied under a top evolutionary biologist who was a staff member of Eugene Koonin. And he made some good points, but I think basically, they might be able to make good arguments for common ancestry, but it fails in the evolution of complexity. By the way, I've published in Springer Nature a criticism of natural selection and the problem of the definition of fitness. It retails for $1,500, but you can get it at your local university library shelves. And so there are a lot of both theoretical and empirical problems with evolutionary theory. I'm pleased to say that I'm one of the few creationists that's actually published in secular peer review. Thank you.
You got it, and I think that's it for the questions. Just let me double check. But want to say, folks, if you enjoy juicy debates like this, highly encourage you. You probably have friends who enjoy them as well. You can share this debate by clicking on that share button down below, and that's a way that more people can hear this debate, especially, hey, if you thought your side was more persuasive, I mean, you might as well share it. So want to say, though, we appreciate our guests. They're linked in the description. You can click on those links right now, including if you're listening at the podcast in addition to YouTube. So I want to say one last thank you. We've appreciated it. It's been a true pleasure. Atheist Junior, Mark Reid, Eric, and Sal, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's good meeting everybody here.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, it was great to meet you, Sal and Eric. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm going to be back with a post-credit scene and a big announcement in just a moment, folks. So stick around for the post-credit scene, and we'll let you know about some upcoming debates as well as some other mumbo-jumbo juicy stuff. So thanks. Stick around, and I'll be right back. Amazing. My dear friends, I am pumped to be with you. Let me just unscramble the old screen here in the old OBS. Want to say thanks so much for being here. It is always fun. Want to say hello to you in the old live chat, as well as I mentioned, just some juicy updates. My dear friends, I have got news. I am very excited to be here. Oh, it's like, oh, that's weird. That's, never seen that before. Let me just pull this in, just expand a little bit. And, oh, there I am. Okay. Well, thanks for your patience. My dear friends, I am pumped, you guys, to be with you. I want to say thanks so much for your support. As Modern Day Debate, we are pumped that it has been growing. Thank you guys for your support. You guys really, it does make a difference. All of the ways that you support Modern Day Debate, hitting like, hitting share, that third person, you could say, like, kind of that genuine credibility as people share, hey, this is Modern Day Debate. Check out this link. I think you might like it. You like controversial topics like me. That really does help. So we appreciate all of your guys' support. Seriously, you make this channel fun. And John Mathers, I don't know if that, I think it was your super chat came in just as we were going off air. It says, a book dealing with the evolution of Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity is Yahweh and the Gods and Goddesses of Canaan by John Day. Thanks for letting us know about that, John Mathers, and thanks for your support of the channel. And got to tell you, folks, we are pumped. So let me tell you a couple. Well, first, let me say hello to you there in the old chat. I Killed Earl. Thanks for coming by. I see you there in the old live chat. As well as Marion Gran Bruheim. Thanks for coming by. And Master Optics, glad to have you. Sandy Pigeon, good to see you again. Jake Green, glad to have you with us. Perfect One, thanks for coming by. Says there is still time to hit the like button. That's true. We're at 152. With 8 more likes, we will be at 150 likes. That is a big goal for a live stream. That's been spectacular. As well as Pi Sorrow, thanks for being with us. I see you there in the old live chat. Jeremy Nolan, good to have you back. Jake Green, happy you're here. Rigged Election 2020. I should not have, just by saying those words is probably going to it's going to ping the video, but glad you're here. Tuck Frump, thanks for coming by. Richard S., happy to have you. D. Ross, pumped you're with us. Kidjol, thanks for coming by. Richard S., happy you're here. It's Rubix. Thanks for dropping in. King 101, happy you're here. TG FKA Trickter, thanks for coming by. We're glad that you're with us. As well as Elijah McMahon and Pure Aussie Gold. Thanks for being with us. Says, pump up the guns. I can't. I told you, it's all an optical illusion. Believe me, although I can tell you, you guys, we are at 252 likes. If we can get to 200 likes, which is 50, that's a lot, because we just hit that goal of 150. Thank you so much for those 8 people that hit like. We have enough easily to get to 200 likes. If we can get to 200 likes, I will take off my shirt and show you my Subway tattoo. If you have not seen this tattoo yet, I don't know if you saw on the news several weeks ago. You probably didn't, because it's not a big story, but it was actually like I was on Fox News and I was on Yahoo Finance and so it was kind of a story. Basically, if I got a 12 by 12 Subway tattoo on my back, they would give me Subway for life. And I saw it and I said, I'm doing it. So I flew to Las Vegas to this Subway promotion event. And I went to the tattoo shop at that time. I actually got there 2 days early and waited out in the heat, and it was brutal. But long story short, I got there, I waited for 2 days, and then the likes are going up fast. It's at 157 already. I'm dead serious. I will take my shirt off. I'll show you this. I have a 12 by 12. It takes up basically my whole back. So it's huge. It is a gigantic tattoo. And if you haven't seen it before, believe me, it's. I looked at it this morning. I looked at it. I didn't and I saw it and I was like, oh gosh, that's there. That's huge. I forgot that was there for a second. But Air Church, good to see you. Mardale, thanks for coming by. We are glad you're here. Evidence and Reasons, thanks for coming by, as well as King 101 and Richard S. We are glad to have you. And Rebel Nazarene, thanks for dropping in. Praise I Am, thanks for coming by. Says his T-Jump, James's son. I always say he's my twin brother, remember? Brooke Sparrow says, smash that like button. Thanks for that. That was long before the tattoo announcements. How long, says James, has the best fake condensing snark voice. Thank you. I appreciate that. And this one from Sapir Adi. Thanks for dropping in. It says, yeah, Sal, but did you study under Craig Venter? Ooh, Sal. Excellus Thibodeau. Thanks for coming by, as well as Jackie N. Baptist. Happy to have you. Solverix. Thanks for coming by. Seriously. Thanks for being a channel supporter. We do have channel memberships. Did you guys know that? I'm totally serious. We really do. We also have a Patreon. If you didn't know, we do have a Patreon in the description box. And it has small perks. You can check it out if you'd like. If you didn't know, yeah, we do have a Patreon. That link is down below. And Flooded Area 3261. Good to see you again. King Klebold. Glad that you are with us. Do you realize this is the captain that you're talking with? That is funny. I'm so glad you said that. In fact, I have something to say to you.
Hello?
Oh, wait. Let me make sure this is right. 2 seconds. Okay, I have something to say to you.
Hi. What's up?
We hope you're doing well, King Klebold. I, too, enjoy the soundboard pranks. Nobody enjoys soundboard pranks more than me. I don't know. I'm a pretty big fan. But Thanks for your kind words. Elijah McMahon says, James is awesome. Been watching you a while. Thanks, Elijah. Seriously, that really does mean a lot. Oh, and NES, thanks for coming by. We are glad you were here. If you are new, folks, you might be wondering, what's this modern day debate channel? Like, what exactly is it? What's your goal? Or
What do you want from me?
well, here's what we want from you, my dear friends. We want you to join us as we fulfill this vision, in particular of striving to provide a neutral platform so that everybody can have their chance to make their case on a level playing field. That's important to us, and we care about our values. And here are our values. In particular, one, as you can tell from our tagline, we want everybody to have a fair shot. We want things to be truly equal. So whether you be Christian, atheist, politically left, politically right, Trump supporter, Biden backer, Bernie bro, you name it, we are glad you are here, and we want to give you a fair shot. That's why we only host debates. We don't have any sort of after shows where we blast one side and say, oh, that was so bad when they said this. Wasn't that stupid? No. We don't do that. For us, we want to give everybody a fair shot, and we let you, the audience, in the comments, decide who you thought was more persuasive. And that goes into our second major value that we hold dearly. In particular, we care that people have the ability to say what they want. And you might be thinking, like, oh, I don't know, James. I mean, some things they can be dangerous or harmful. And my thought is this. That's why our third value is so important. We do value competition. We believe in the, you could say, natural selection of ideas, the arena of arguments, that the best ideas are going to win out. And there's empirical data for this. I can't make a good empirical case for that being the case, because some people say, well, yeah, but I know that, for example, let's say we have someone who a lot of people will say, hey, I don't like these alt-right guys. And I got to be honest, I'm not an alt-right person myself. I'm a pretty vanilla, bland guy. I'm a pretty moderate, like middle of the road type of guy. So, I wouldn't identify as like a Bernie bro or like a alt-right or whatever it is. I'm like kind of like, I'm undecided on a lot. But I've got to tell you, there's some people might say, oh, you can't let the alt-right types, you can't let them on. It's dangerous, James. And I say, well, I don't know. I mean, do you think that their arguments are better? And they go, no, of course not. And I say, well, but if you don't think their arguments are better, and you think the arguments against them are actually the best arguments, then why is it so bad? I mean, wouldn't they just lose? I mean, wouldn't that be a good thing that there are, kind of arguments or ideas are kind of exposed, you could say? And they say, well, and I say, because the empirical data, it really does, and I'm not joking about this, the empirical data does suggest, no joke, I'm not just saying this, that indeed the best arguments will win out. And some people might say, well, yeah, but what if their speaker is of whatever controversial position that they don't like? Because sometimes maybe people even say, we don't want those flat earthers to be allowed on here or whatever. And they might say, but it might be that they're more persuasive because, maybe they have like kind of a socially suave speaker speaking on their behalf. And, we don't like that because they might be, especially suave or persuasive and, just because they're good looking or have a sense of humor, whatever it is. And so they might say, that's why you shouldn't host. And it's like, well, the empirical data suggests that the best arguments are going to win out, even while you could say controlling for or factoring in, those people who might be suave or good looking or have a great sense of humor, whatever it is. All that, all things considered, the best arguments do tend to win out. And so that's why we value those things. Namely, we want to give everybody a fair shot. We believe in true tolerance, which is, we're going to platform people that we don't even agree with in the slightest. Like, in fact, if you think about it, you really can't agree with everyone when the questions are oftentimes contradictory. So, and I should say, you could say the answers to the question are actually contradictory. So, like, if you say, is there a God? It's like, well, there is or there isn't. Like, there's really you might be a middle grounder yourself, or you're like, well, I'm on the fence. But in terms of reality, like, there is or there isn't. Like, one of us is wrong, right? So, want to say, Malavia, good to see you there. Thanks for your channel membership support. Seriously, it means a lot. Says, hey, James, sorry I missed the live show. We'll watch tomorrow. Well, we're glad you made it, Malavia. Thanks for saying hi. And Rob Simpson, good to see you. As well as Joe Schwartz says, what do you think the world will look like in 10 years? I don't know. Normally, I'd say things are going to be about the same they've always been, and because I've thought about this a lot. But at the same time, man, you know what? Ever since maybe 2016, I've wondered if we've been on some sort of alternate timeline. Because obviously it was like, whoa, like nobody, whether you like him or hate him, nobody predicted, well, some people predicted. Most people didn't predict Trump was going to win, and then he did. But then also, like the pandemic, we've never seen anything like that. Another one that I never thought would happen in my lifetime, we saw Roe versus Wade get overturned. Another one is, and this is still, it's not as big as like Roe versus Wade overturning, but it is pretty big, is that like 10,000 in college debt relief. That's another big thing. Like the world is, and then, like the war in Ukraine. Gosh, I feel like I'm worried about saying these words because I feel like, blank tube is going to like crack down on me, and they're going to put those little like, those little like disclaimers that they put at the bottom of a video that's like, regarding this topic, blah, 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 blah. And, we want to make sure that so Sapir Audi, I see you there in the old live chat. Largo Stefanius, thanks for coming by, as well as Yuda Heku. Good to see you again. Perfect One says, my question is, what can you get if you get an Amazon tramp stamp? Oh, baby. If I could get free Amazon for life, I'd get an Amazon tattoo. Cameron Hall says, do you have to show the Subway employee that tattoo whenever you shop? No, they gave me gift cards. And let's see. King Klebold says, I can't believe you watch Kimball. I do. King Klebold, were you watching Kimball before you you didn't hear about them from me, right? Because I've like tweeted their stuff. Like, were you already just watching Kimball, and then you just one day were in the live chat and you're like, is that Modern Day Debate, the channel I also watch? Because yeah, I'm like, that's so funny. That what a small world. But Jake Green says, more Mark Reid. I think that'd be fun. We enjoy Mark. Mark's been a huge supporter of the channel. And then I Killed Earl says, let's hope we don't turn into an authoritarian dystopian hellscape. Fair enough. Amy Newman, thanks for coming by. Says, Pure Aussie, Sal is having an after show. I'll pin that. I've got that pinned at the top of the chat. We used to link after shows for people no matter what view they, had. People don't do after shows as often. It's like kind of realizing like, oh, it's not as often. Because yeah, if our guests want to, we're willing to. Amy did it a lot. I see you there in the live chat, Amy. Good to see you. And Perfect One says, I want everybody to encourage James to get a YouTube tramp stamp. How I would love it if YouTube gave me free. Would I do it if they gave me free membership for life? I don't know. That doesn't seem like it's worth very much. Because what is the YouTube membership? I'm on the student version because I've got to tell you guys about a big announcement. So I pay $96 a year for the YouTube membership because I have the student version, so it's like $7.99. And then I use it a lot though. Like if any membership is worth it for me, it's the YouTube one. So it's a $7.99 well spent. But if I multiplied the 95, so basically like $95. So okay, 88 times. But let's say we go with the actual value of it. So $11.99 times 12. That would be normally the membership would be $143. So $143, and then what am I, 35? So let's say like I don't think I'm gonna make it past 85. Frankly, I don't know if I want to make it past 85. No offense to those who are, but I mean I'm just kind of like meh. After a while, it seems like I've found that people as they get older, they have more acceptance of they've had more thinking through like the fact that they're going to die someday. But anyway, the point is this. 100. So what is it? Let's see. That for me, that'd be another 50 years. That's a long time. So times 50. This is not going to be worth it. I'm not getting it. So it'd be worth $7,000 for YouTube membership for life. I don't know if I'm going to get that tattoo. It depends on how big it is. Maybe I would. But yes, let's see. So yeah, depending on the size, I would. I mean, $7,000. I mean, that's kind of it's like if you get a small tattoo, like a 3x3, like hey. It's pretty quick work. And if you don't have to wait in line, even better. Because that was the hard thing. When I was waiting in line for the tattoo in Las Vegas. It was so hot. It was Las Vegas. But here's the announcement I was going to make. I am so happy. I feel so blessed. I'm so thankful. I feel so grateful and happy because I'm like, wow, that was a long, long challenge. Is that I have passed my candidacy exam, which means, for those of you who don't know, I'm working on my doctorate. Basically, I have one more step. It's crazy. I can't believe it. I started this channel in my first year. So it was almost exactly 4 years ago that I started Modern Day Debate. Technically, the channel is only about 3.5 years old in the sense of like when we became a debate channel. So it's like three years and 10 months or something old. But I'm excited. As I've passed the candidacy exam, this is great news. This basically means all I have left is the dissertation. And then, Lord willing, if I get there, I will be Dr. James Coons. And I will not make anyone call me James, except for my enemies. But I am really excited about that, you guys. It is like, I'm getting, Poker Man says, what are you getting a PhD in? It's in industrial organizational psychology. I love my field. I really do enjoy the content. I really do enjoy the research that I'm about to start on for my dissertation. I think it's really cool and fun, and I just love it. So I am pumped. I am excited. I feel like I said, I'm very grateful. So it has been a 13-month preparation phase because, to be honest, the first time I took my candidacy exam, I failed it. I didn't tell you guys that because it was sad. But I passed it the second time around, and I needed to, because if I didn't pass it the second time around, it would have been sayonara, James. In other words, I would not have been able to continue in the PhD program. It was like sudden death mode. So it was like, well, if you pass, you're still in, and you move on to the dissertation. And if you don't pass, well, you just graduate with the master's that you got in the program, but you don't get to go on to the PhD part. So I am super grateful. But yes, I Killed Earl says it happens. It's true. Yeah, I have no shame. You, in order to do things in life, you are going to have to be willing to get banged up, to get, to kind of bang against the rocks and, get your knees skinned and where it's like you get scratched up and that's life. If you're going to go after something, that's what you're going to experience, and you have to keep pushing through it. Because I've got to tell you, the PhD has been one of the hardest things I've done. It is really challenging. I'm thankful. I like it, and I'm absolutely planning on finishing it, but it's been 4 years in it, and I've got one more year left probably, and I love it, but it is intense. So Poker Man, that's right. Solverix, thanks for your support. Says, amazing. Thanks for that. Seriously. Amy Newman says, congratulations. Thank you for that. Seriously. Appreciate that, Amy. And Stupid Whore Energy, or Stupid Beta Energy, says, James has his PhD in lovin'. That might be true. This one from Poker Man says, that's cool. Congrats. Thanks so much, Poker Man. Seriously, that means more than you know. And I've got to tell you guys, it's exciting. It's encouraging. It is. Yeah, I always encourage people. I want to encourage you when it comes to thanks for your support. Perfect One says, show James some love. Get it to 200 likes and tell him how much we want a YouTube tattoo by posting a YouTube emoticon. That's funny. And then Pokerman says, doing what you love in life is what life is all about. I appreciate that. And Pokerman says, 364 watching, 99 likes. Oh, yeah. It's changed since then. But Atheist Junior, thanks for your support. Appreciate that. And appreciate your kind words in the chat. Jeremy Nolan says, James, thank you for this channel. Appreciate that, Jeremy. Seriously, it means a lot. And then Rocky Shepherd says, tell yourself the truth is all you need to know about psychology. Thank you for that. And Character 57 says, James, when are you going to have Matt Walsh on to debate what is a human? I don't know if I know who Matt Walsh is. Matt. Oh, yeah, I know him. It's the guy with the beard. I actually reached out to him about a debate with Vosh, but I hadn't heard back. So I don't know if Matt Walsh is going to be up for it, but this one from Alex Trimo Del Norte says, the only standard in the standard is of no standard. Thank you for that. And let's see here. Jeremy Nolan says, congratulations, James. Thank you for that, Jeremy Nolan. Seriously, I appreciate that. And then I do have a tattoo on my back. You guys, for real, I will show it. We're only 30 likes away. Stupid Beta Energy, I texted you about a possible debate if you want to be in it. So, you should stop being a beta and consider it. But yeah, basically, I have a middle ground opinion on education. So when it comes to higher ed, you obviously don't need it to be an expert in something. Like if you really want to read a ton, you can be an expert. Like there is such a thing. I think it's extremely, extremely rare. There is such a thing as what's the name of the Will in Good Will Hunting. Like there is such a thing as that person. I think that it's rare though. To be fair, like one of the most important things a professor can give you is a syllabus and a deadline, because that when you have the homework that you have to write a paper or whatever it is based on the readings, that motivates you to actually do the readings, because most people on their own aren't motivated enough to become a master in a field. But then again, like, do you want to become a master in a field per se, or at least one like an academic field? Like, I have a more balance. Like, I hate that there are some people who are like, everybody should go to college. I don't hate those people. I just I hate that position. I also hate the position of like, college is stupid. I'm like, okay, no. Like, hold on. This is kind of like a case by case like basis that you have to decide. Like, it depends. Like that's kind of the classic, like usually more sophisticated answer in life is, do you want to college? Well, I mean, if you want to go to college, you want to be a doctor. I mean, if you want to be a doctor in like a standard hospital, yeah, you're gonna have to go to college, be pre-med, and then go get an MD, which you have to be a cyborg to do. And you want to be a lawyer, yeah, you're gonna have to go to college. Like, you want to be a dentist, yeah, you're gonna have to go to college. Like, there are a lot of professions that if you want to do at least any sort of standard conventional route, you're like, yeah, can you be a doctor who like, if like Standing for Truth put on like a white robe and said he was a doctor and he's like going to treat people that came to his house, like, I don't know if you'd want him as your doctor. Like, so, you could without getting the MD, but I mean, like, depends on what you want in life. I don't know if you're going to get that many clients if you do that, by the way. But the other thing is, there are a lot of happy, successful career routes besides those things I just mentioned. Be an electrician, be a plumber, start your own business, and a billion different things that, you could do well in life. I mean, it depends on that's the other thing too. I sometimes think people, and to be fair, like oftentimes even students in my own classes that I've taught, I think they think of like college is so you can make a good living. And I'm like, well, you don't need to go to college to make a good living. I promise. Like, the other thing is, so in other words, I sometimes think I'm sad that people think that that's what it's for. They're like, you don't need to go to college. Just like, and it's like, well, yeah, nobody said you had to make a good living. But like some people, they have their heart set on being a doctor. It's like, all right, well then go to college. And some people are like, no, I don't. I just want to make a living, provide for my family, or just for myself, whatever it is. More power to you. That's one thing too, is I'm surprised that in a lot of Christian circles, like it's like always just assumed from the very start, like, you ought to have a family, even though, like, like 1 Corinthians, like Paul says, like, I'd rather you be like me, be single, fully devote yourself to the Lord. So like, I just feel like it's like, even though that's kind of like Paul's perspective, like which would be considered scriptural, I feel like a lot of Christians like don't know about that verse, or they don't talk about it, or they just don't consider it scripture, maybe, because it is true that Paul, it's an interesting passage because Paul's like, not me, not the Lord, but me. So it's kind of like it's an interesting like epistemology thing. But anyway, King Klebold says James is the new Jared Fogle. That's very funny. So I can assure you that's not true. I have my problems, but not Jared Fogle problems. This one from Pure Rossi Gold says the tattoo is legit. I Googled it. That's right. Yeah, it is legit. If you Google it, if you put Fort Collins, or if you say like Subway tattoo for life, James, it'll come up. You guys think I'm making this up? I'm serious. The tattoo's real. I'm not making it up. But thank you for your support, Rob Simpson. Seriously, thanks for all of your support. That means a lot. I see your kind words in chat, and I really do appreciate it. It really does mean a lot. And let's see. Joe Schwartz says, James, what is your favorite anime and why is it One Piece? I don't know I don't know about anime. I've been told I would like it, but I've got to get into it. Stupid Horror Energy says, I lost my phone. I'll send you an email about this debate. Character 57 says, James, why do I feel like your type is the girl from Babylon B. Can I email her video to you? Is there a girl from Babylon B? I didn't even know that. I would guess that she's probably maybe the wife of the, I don't know for sure. Because I've seen the guy from Babylon B, like the guy with the beard. Usually has like athletic outfits on. It's funny it's funny how big that got, because I remember I started seeing them in like 2014 and like, oh my gosh, like they have just completely grown, like behemoth wise. I don't know which girl you're talking about. I see a girl in the Starbucks video. Is your Starbucks barista conservative? No, the warning signs. That's pretty funny. Okay. And let's see. But yeah, I don't even know what my type is. I'll be honest. I usually go for brunettes. I'll be honest. Rocky Shepherd says the alpha and the omega lives in me. And Claire says, hello, James, new subscriber. Love your channel. I was wondering if you are asked to be a moderator in debates, or do you pick the topic and select who you want to debate? Thanks, Claire, for your question. If you are asked to be a moderator in debates. A lot of people reach out. I get like, oh man, it's probably like an average of one a day. It might be that. Where we do get a lot of people requesting to be in debates. I just don't have the time to host everybody. I just don't have the time to organize all the debates. So like, even though Amy and Kaz do a great job hosting, I'm sorry, like people ask. And the biggest thing, it helps a ton, is if a person already has a channel, it makes it a lot easier for us to vet people. And in a way, we can kind of like outsource the vetting in the sense that, like, if they have a successful channel, it's like, yeah, like people like listening to them talk. It's a pretty good test of whether or not they're going to like listening to them talk on moderated debate. So, but yeah, they said, I was wondering if you are asked to be a moderator, or do you pick the topic and select who you want to debate? I will sometimes, I know people's interests, like roughly. And so sometimes, like, for example, like, I knew there was a topic where I was like, oh, someone just reached out about this. And I was like, who I think would like that? So-and-so. She'd probably enjoy this topic. So I'm like, okay, I'll go ask her. I'll say, hey, so-and-so is looking for this. Would you enjoy this dialogue with them? And so that's oftentimes how it happens. And then, let's see. Beamsy says, Will from Goodwill Hunting is not an example of a master in a field, as used just has knowledge with no application. Yeah, that's true about the application thing. I generally think that you get to be good at your job by doing it. College isn't per se like great at preparing you for a job. There's a lot of adaptation that happens, although it can be a good first start. And Beamsy says, James, to be an expert in a field, you need to operate within a field and be recognized by your peers, not just know a lot. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Let's see. I mean, it depends on your definition of expert. I don't really. It's not like I don't really have any strong attachment to. If you want to use your definition, like, it's fine. It makes no difference to me. I would say if you want to be an expert in the sense of like being familiar with all of the ideas, like in philosophy, let's say, like, great. If you want to be expert as defined as like people knowing, I can use that definition too. It seems a little like. I don't like, it doesn't seem a great use of time to debate what definition you want to use. Silverick says, what's your favorite sub? Probably the Boss or the Great Garlic. And let's see here. Jack, I appreciate you being in chat. However, your copy and pastes do look spammy. So please do not copy and paste. We ask that of everybody, no matter what they're saying. So I Killed Earl says it's very simple. Let's see. Ball Diablo, good to see you. Rocky Shepherd. And then Stupid or Energy says stop. Oh, it's to the spammer. And Character 57 says no, she was a guest actor. And yes, she was a brunette. See, I knew it. I don't know. You don't know her name, though? What is it they told me I looked like? I've been hearing this lately. What's the name of the bad guy from The Handmaid's Tale? Commodore Fred or something? Commander Fred? I don't know. He's the bad guy. He's the antagonist. Okay, I hate to do this because, Jack, like, it's nothing about what your message is, but you just keep spamming. Oops, I accidentally hid you. I'm not going to hide you, but I am going to give you a little timeout. So I'm giving you a little timeout just because people, you're welcome to say what you like in chat, but not copy and pasting it, because that just everybody gets like, nobody likes that. But let's see. Alex Trimo, and that goes for anything. So like if somebody said like, you know, atheism is the correct position or Christianity is the correct position, it's like, hey, like say what you want, but just please don't copy and paste it. Tuck Frump, good to see you. And let's see. Claire, I am happy to give you my answer. And then Leslie Flemons, good to see you. Says, you got that right. I graduated from college and I'm still looking for a job. Good to see you, Leslie Flemons. Thanks for your support of the channel, by the way. We appreciate it. And thanks for your idea of, is there a war on women? We hosted that topic and it was a fire debate. People love that. So Leslie, seriously, thank you. Because it's true, we did. It was never to try to make it seem as if there was like a war on men, like we weren't doing it. It's more because it was like, until we did it several times in a row, because we did do it a lot, it was that, you know, that was a new topic that people like, it's like a topic that's not as commonly talked about. Because I think it's commonly talked about in society, like, is there a war on women? But is there a war on men? Like, I don't think that's as common, but nonetheless, I'm glad you said we should do that. Is there a war on women? And we'll do that again. John Ultra says, James, are you finished with your degree? Not this current one. The current one, I've still got a year to probably do my dissertation. And then Character 57 says, don't tell these kids that. That's funny. And Leslie Flynn says, James, are you from Canada? No, I just sound like it. Stupid Horror Energy says, James is from Minnesota. I did live in Minnesota for like 8 years. I grew up in Wisconsin, and then I lived in Minnesota for 8 years. Then I lived in Texas for 4 years. And now I lived in 4 years. Holy smokes. It's 4 years that I've lived in Colorado. Like, oh my gosh, that's a long time. I can't believe it. It's scary. It's how fast time is going. Oh yeah, but do I look like that guy, Commodore Fred or Commander Fred from the villain in Handmaid's Tale? You guys got to let me know. But want to say thanks for your support. Seriously, I love you guys. You guys make this fun. I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. And I appreciate all of your guys' support and all the ways that you do it. And it's true. We are pumped, my dear friends, about the future of modern day debate as we are improving our game, working on improving things all the time. And I just appreciate you guys. You make this fun. So I got to go. It's getting late. It's really late. It's 10 here. I got to go. Love you guys. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. And I will see you next time. Amazing. Beta.